Welcome, Internet, to another Mattriarchy. I'm going to go ahead and keep talking for a little while here because the message just went out over Twitter. So, the good chance that nobody even knows about it yet. And I forgot to put the link on my Facebook page. That's okay. I don't have any real friends on Facebook. So, how are you guys doing out there? Hey, I am joined this evening, of course, by Matt McGibson.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going? It's actually funny you did the whole thing there. I was thinking in my head the other day about how you sort of do the Ed McMahon thing from way back in the day. But that's of course before your time. Johnny Carson wasn't even on the Tonight Show at the time you were born.
I'd have to I'm going to be honest, I don't know who Ed McMahon is.
Oh man, holy cow! So Ed McMahon was Johnny Carson's sidekick / co-host on the Tonight Show from like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I think late 60s is when Johnny got the show, but I might be wrong about that. It was before my time. So, how was Christmas break been for you there, Matt?
It was pretty good. We had a lot going on. Let me try and think, because my birthday is actually really close to Christmas. I think
That's true.
pictures I shared from my trip to Third Eye Comics. It's the biggest comic book store in the state of Maryland. Really great place. Like it's I actually describe it like this, and the one guy who works there, the cashier had said this is a really good way of describing it. Imagine a comic book convention, but shrunk down and stuck into one building all year round. It's 3 times the size of my local comic store, maybe even 4 times the size. It's massive.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've never made it, I assume you've ever made it farther, as far west as I am. But out here nearby in Denver, there's the Mile High Comics.
I've heard of Mile High Comics, actually.
It's a pretty big shop. They've got a warehouse downtown Denver that has like 2 or 3 million books that are in there. It's insane.
Just got a message from Carl. He said he's going to be joining us in just a second.
Which is fine. For those of you out there on the ether, anybody coming in a little bit later, or watching us later, we're going to be joined by Carl of Carltoons, who I guess was a guest last week when I was absent. I think actually he hosted the stream, right?
And an embarrassing turn of events that was. Apparently, you have to be qualified. You have to be cleared to stream. Now, I've never uploaded anything to my YouTube channel before, so when I was hosting this, I was not cleared. I was planning to do like a test stream the day of to make sure everything went all right, and it didn't go out whatsoever. It told me I had to wait at least 24 hours, so I was panicking. Carl was very gracious, and he lent me his channel. We did a house party edition, and without older Matt and his wisdom and his very gentlemanly nature, it was a little hectic. There were some things we talked about that were a little saucier than I guess we normally talk about, but it was a lot of fun. The stream is 4 hours long, but it was a lot of fun, and it was a great time with Carl and Scott.
See, I feel suddenly less bad about only catching 20 minutes. We went on for 4 hours.
Yeah, it went on for a while. It turned into much more of a hangout. Like, I feel like we kind of have a structure here when it's the two of us together. Like, you bring a lot of plans with you, whereas last week it was much more of a hangout. It was a lot of fun, but that's really what it was.
Yeah, when I was able to catch it, was just like I said, just for about 20 minutes, and it was all Smash Brothers all the time. I have to because my children, once again, our age difference, but my children are very, very into Smash, so they talk about it a lot. And with whichever game it was that came out last month, they were very, very talkative about it. But they had a buddy who went out and they had a couple of big old Christmas break parties playing Smash and all that kind of stuff. But that is not my scene, but I hear about it.
Let's see. Carl says he needs a link.
I thought it should be, I added him to a group direct message on the Twitter. So I shot one for him and Matt Trinh both, but if he needs one directly, I can copy that again.
Let me see what here. Let me try it. There. I just sent him a copy of this link, so hopefully that works.
Well, thank you.
Matt Trinh is going to be joining us for the last 30 minutes, correct?
If he gets off work right, that was the plan. He was supposed to join me 2 weeks ago. It was going to be a 3-Matt edition. Myself, Matt Wenger, and Matt Trinh hung up at work. Didn't let him go for another half hour, and so he wasn't able to get home until end of broadcast time. And the funny thing about that is that even when he got home, his internet was so spotty it wouldn't connect to the stream to watch the last 5 minutes or whatever. So, which is okay.
Sometimes it's just 5 minutes. Yeah. Let's see. So here we have today Danielle. That's my girlfriend. She's actually made a very big conscious effort to pop in the last couple of streams, and I really, really appreciate that. Love you, honey.
Now I have to ask here: is it to keep an eye on you so you don't ruin the public image? Is that what the story is?
I feel like she'd care about that more than I would. So you're in the right direction. Let's see. Nacho's joining us once again. He says, "Hello, everybody. Smash Brothers is amazing," and see, he's got the facts straight.
Well, that's somebody should. On that island, somebody should know what's up.
All right. So how was your Christmas?
Mine was pretty good. I was a little disappointed the week before Christmas. I go in to talk to my boss, and she says, "What are your plans to take off for the holiday?" And I said, "I'd like X number of days off." And she says, "No." And I say, "Why?" And she says, "You don't have enough time off for that." And I go through and I was sick a couple times this year, and I had to take a week off to work on my house. And darn it, I had used all but 2 days of my vacation. So I just got Christmas and Christmas Eve off.
Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that.
It's okay. It's okay. I have my job it's not horribly difficult. It's not necessarily easy, but it's not backbreaking labor. So having to come to work is not a too big a deal. So, and we had hosted at my house on Christmas itself, which was nice. So we had my mom and my brother down. My sister was recently moved to Idaho. She was not able to come out for the holiday this year, but we'll see what goes on from there. So, and an extra bonus just before Christmas on the first day of winter, I got the pleasure of going to see Aquaman.
How was it?
Cool. I'm actually wearing the hair down today in honor of the King of the Seas. So there's that. And my buddy Barry and I are planning on tentatively planning on catching the matinee again tomorrow, because I really, really like that movie.
Have you seen Spider-Verse?
I have not. I honestly, I don't know. I have no, I don't want to say no interest in Spider-Verse, because that wouldn't be fair. But I'm not excited for Spider-Verse, if that makes sense.
I wasn't as excited. I mean, the animation and stuff did make me happy, but from the get-go. But I feel like it was, once I actually got in there and saw it, and I heard all the praise and stuff, so I was like, yeah, I'll give it a try. My family wanted to go see it a couple days before Christmas. I went with them. I had a blast. I said this in the last stream when we were talking about Spider-Verse. I feel like I wrote like 3 different tweets about it or something, and I normally hate tweet threads, but I feel like I could have gone on for 10 tweets or something like that. I had a great time.
Good. Part of it for me is just the fact that I'm not really a huge fan of the multiverse idea in stories. So the idea that there's these alternate versions of Spider-Man across the multiverse already kind of makes me like, meh.
I think, or I don't know. I do really like stuff. Did you read Metal last year when that was going on?
I did not.
That was actually pretty fun. Like normally, I'm not big on comic book events because I feel like they tend to be really gimmicky. A lot of characters are done out of character. But I feel like they did a really good job. They had a really unique concept. I mean, yeah, to be fair, like there was the criticism from diversity in comics, which was that it seems like something a stoner came up with. It was like, whoa, what if Batman was Aquaman, but a girl, dude? Like, I do think that's kind of a fair criticism of it, but it was a lot of fun. And it changed the DC universe, or at least set up. I haven't been as big on the DC universe since a lot of the books that I really liked got cut. Oh, it's Carl.
Hey.
Welcome to the stream, Carl. How's it going?
It's going pretty good for me. How's it going for you?
Excellent. Well, we were just in the middle of talking about DC Dark Knight's Metal. Matt there was trying to convince me why I should read it.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, it can be a little edgy at sometimes, but I had a lot of fun collecting, especially the side issues. I almost felt like the side issues were better than the main story. And that isn't to say that the main story wasn't fun, but these side issues, especially the ones, each issue that examined each member of the Dark Knights was really, really well done. I have every single issue's, what is that called? Is it holographic color or cover when you turn it? Like I'm remembering all these terms from when I collected Pokemon cards as a kid, and thinking
it's holographic covers.
Yes, and they look beautiful, especially the cyborg. Oh, I forget what his name was. The War Machine, not War Machine. Oh, damn it.
Was it like Murder Machine or something?
Murder Machine. I think that was it. Yeah, but that was a really that was a super cool cover. But each of them, like you kind of feel for each of the Dark Knights. I like the unique setup, and I felt like the DC universe was kind of changed at the end in a way that was pretty interesting. I guess, is it spoiler material? I mean, it's been more than a year, and a lot of the books that have come afterwards play off of it. But do you know what happens at the end of Metal?
I do not. The only thing I know about it in terms of its overall impact is that, well, what I picked up from the Terrifics, because I got the first 8 issues of Terrifics, and then I decided Jeff Lemire didn't need my money anymore, and then I've been following Hawkman, but I've only made it to issue 3. I've got them, I just haven't read them past that. So
I hear you. I just now got around to some books that I've had since September. It's been a crazy school year.
Oh, I have books I've had for years I haven't read yet.
Yeah, I guess that's the story of the comic book fandom is you have books that you're like, oh, we'll get there someday, and then it just sits there and you look at it every day on your way to work or whatever. But yeah. But did you pick up like the change at the end? I'm just gonna say the universe got a whole lot bigger. Was that discussed in?
A little bit. The idea that that there's certain alternate dimensions that are set that are like de facto part of it, and but
Let's see. I'm just like wondering if I should talk about the big change because I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. And I haven't read as much DC stuff lately. Some of it's just because, like I'll admit, there's some tension between consumers, particularly our circle of consumers, and these different creators, and I see them. I'm like, oh, this guy told me to eat a boot covered in feces. This guy told me this. This guy made a really nasty blanket statement about people like me, and it's I like to think people can have their own opinions, but I do kind of have lines where I don't feel like I'm being respected as a customer.
Oh yeah, I hear that.
I think there's some real legitimacy to that. But so yeah. Carl, since you're showing up here, and I've spent a lot of time talking to Matt, let's go ahead and redirect off from Metal a little bit, since Matt can't decide whether to spoil it or not. Let's talk a little bit about your comic journey, how you got into comics, and what are the kind of things you get inspiration from.
Oh, okay. Well, I've been reading comics for a while, but what really got me into comics as a kid were the Archie Sonic comics. I was big on video games as a kid, so Sonic was like the go-to comic for me. And another factor in that was the fact that I lived in a fairly strict religious household. And at the time, comics like Batman and Superman and Spider-Man and all the big Marvel and DC titles were a lot edgier than my mom allowed. So Sonic kind of filled in that superhero gap for me.
Well, now, I'd like to point out, I mean, this is somewhat of a side note, because like I also grew up in a pretty, I wouldn't call it strict religious, because I never felt like I was restricted. I felt like I had to fight against the system or anything like that. But we took religion and faith very seriously, and I had some similar things with that. But the thing that I thought was the strangest about that is, like, when I was a kid, Superman was pretty much a kind of comic anyone could read. I mean, it wasn't edgy, right? I mean, there were a little bit of weirdness because it was during the whole courtship of Lois Lane, so there was a little bit of risque stuff going on there. But for the most part, like, you know, Batman, Superman, even Flash are the things that pretty much anyone could read. There wasn't the oh, don't be afraid of the edginess. Don't cut yourself on the edge. There wasn't a thing. You know, I mean, if you got into Preacher, or if you got into Punisher or something like that, but your mainstream, your flagship titles were intended for an all ages population. I mean, with Batman and Daredevil, you're probably looking at, you know, like a PG or something, but that wasn't a thing where, you know, you have to avoid if you were a little kid getting into comics. And to hear you say, well, Batman was too edgy, Superman was too edgy when I was a kid, so I read Sonic the Hedgehog. That's a sad statement about the state of the industry. That's an industry that's not breeding the next generation of comic readers into the superhero genre, and that makes my heart a little sad.
Funny point to talk about, like, kid-friendly comics is, you guys ever notice that in cartoons they always show, it's like, oh, this kid, he reads a lot of comics, or this kid's nuts about comics. In the real world, like, you go to the store and there's like you go to my local comic book shop, for example, and there's a tiny section for kids and kid-friendly material. The rest of it, like, most of the wall is covered in like image kind of stuff, like independent, very edgy, you know, or very edgy indie stuff. And then there's some DC and Marvel, but a lot of the DC and Marvel, you know, you'll see like some blood and some like mortal wounds on the covers of these books. So I just think that's interesting.
One of the things too that was weird too. Like, once again, this is my age. When I grew up, like, every gas station, every grocery store had a comics with the magazines, right? And you might be hard pressed to get every issue if you're a collector. But if you were just picking them up sporadically, and a lot of comics were done in one comics, you could pick up comics anywhere. And so going into shops, when I first started going into comic shops when I was 14 years old, man, there was some borderline, you know, risque stuff, especially coming from where I was, middle of the country, very churchy environment, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, there's a lot of boobs I'm trying to get at. And that was real. My first couple of times my parents took me in a comic shop, they were real nervous about it. But as far as getting regular comics, I was just at the co-op or whatever getting comics, and that wasn't a problem, because I mean, there wasn't that same environment at the spinner rack there was in the shop in the big city, you know.
I get really giddy whenever, like, we have one local ran grocery store near us that still carries comic books on the rack, like, and it makes me giddy. And then sometimes I'll go to Walmart, which I'm actually very surprised that people are having trouble finding the mega DC issues at Walmart, because every single time I go, no matter what store I'm in, I always find them. Mm-hmm. And I live in a pretty densely populated area.
You got the nose, Matt. That's what it is. The comic nose.
I can smell Marvel's ink dripping off the page from a mile away.
Well played. Well played.
Eloquent.
Interrupted you.
Huh?
I said, no, I don't think you interrupted anybody. But yeah, well, maybe there is something else I could think about. But yeah, it's also sometimes it's hard to recommend stuff to your little kids because I also, funny enough, and this coincidence goes, I grew up in a very strict household. I always say this to describe the way our family was run. We were like the only family that followed the ESRB. So we followed a lot of rules like that. Like I remember my parents being scared because they saw Smash Brothers Melee, and I wanted that for Christmas back in 2004 or something. And I remember mom called our house phone with her cell, and she said, "Now Matthew, this game, Super Smash Brothers, your dad's scared because it's rated T. But you promised there's like no blood or swearing or anything." And I'd be like, "Yes, mom, there's no blood or swearing in Super Smash Brothers." And like that's the kind of family we were.
Well, that's actually kind of like my family. When I was growing up, I was only allowed to play a T-rated game if it had no blood nor swearing.
I wasn't allowed to play Zelda because the box said for Wind Waker and stuff, it said animated blood, and that I don't remember any in that game at all. But I was not allowed to play the Zelda games as a kid.
That's hilarious.
See, and that's actually, I'm coming at that from a similar, perspective as a parent. Like, we're more concerned with sexual content than violence, like, by a lot. So my kids haven't seen like a lot of movies that their peers have, but they've seen Lord of the Rings. They play Fallout. So I'm way less than I am with sexual content because it's easy to know. I mean, in normal life, you don't go around punching people in the face. We all understand that. But someday you will want to make out with a girl. Let's learn the appropriate rules for that first.
I never thought about it like that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the thing. You really have very little call. And my kids are enrolled in martial arts, and we talk about the appropriate use of physical violence and that stuff too. But there are very few cases in life when you're going to appropriately resort to physical violence. But you will want to make out with a girl. So that's a thing to pay a lot of attention to getting right in your head. So.
Nacho's in the chat this got to me because he says, "I've got the comic nose, but I don't have the Sprite cranberry nose."
That's sad.
Oh, I can't find that anywhere. Apparently, that's like an issue across the country. Is a lot of people are saying that they're laughing at the memes and really wanting to try Sprite cranberry, but can't find it anywhere.
Yeah, there are a lot of places that have it. I've only seen it like 2 or 3, but I've had it. It's good.
I had it a lot last year. Like I actually bought like a full, or it might have been a gift actually. I think my brother ran out to the store and he was like, "Happy birthday!" and he came back with a 12-pack of or whatever, however many are in those boxes. I don't think it's 12, but he came back with a box of Sprite cranberry, and I had that, and it's seasonal, so it was gone. So I was looking forward to coming back for Christmas, and I can't find it anywhere.
Is it the box of cans or the box of bottles?
Box of cans.
I think that is in fact 12.
Oh well, it's one of those things that you feel like it'd be so obvious, but I've never paid attention.
Yeah, I think it's 2 Sixers that's in that. So.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair thing. But like, I can't believe I've never really actually stopped to look at it or think about it that much.
Yeah, it's one of those things. So anyway.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Carl, you said you were getting into comics with the Sonic the Hedgehog comics. What was beyond that? Was kind of the rest of your comics journey? That's where we left off with that.
Okay, so after a while, I stopped having an interest in comics because I stopped having an interest in the Sonic comics. That was like in my mid-teens, I think. And eventually I came back to comics after the whole superhero movie boom. I'm like, wait a second, I'm old enough now in the strict household. I could actually read these things.
I can do what I want. I'm a grown-up, Mom.
Exactly. That's basically what went down. So I started trying to find a good jumping on point. And eventually I found The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. And that's kind of what kicked off my interest in comics fully. From there, I went around trying to find back issues and trades of Specifically, a lot of DC stuff. Like I tried finding things like Kingdom Come and whatnot. Basically, whenever I heard tell of like, oh, this was a big story back in the day, I'm like, I'm gonna go find that and read it. And since then, I've been pretty big into comics. I've also, oh yeah, I've also been fairly interested in comic strips, like newspaper strips, regardless whether they be comedy newspaper strips or the old-fashioned adventure newspaper strips, like the Alex Raymond stuff. That interests me a lot. So from there, I just kind of branched out into basically, I tried reading almost every kind of thing under the sun, including manga and whatnot. I'm a huge Osamu Tezuka fan now. I love Astro Boy and all that stuff.
Astro Boy is always important to me as the
Japanese names is terrible. So I can remember properties, but not the names very well. So.
Well, I can understand why you'd think Astro Boy is a terrible name.
No, not Astro Boy.
Oh,
the creator's name. I don't retain Japanese creators' names.
I guess you could just call him. I guess the easy way to refer to Osamu Tezuka would just be to call him the Beret Man, because he was always wearing a beret for some reason.
Yeah. To me, like when it comes to creators with foreign names, they have to be someone really significant to me. So, or I guess even it stretches beyond that. But Hideki Kamiya, a lot of the Platinum Games guy, or Akira Toriyama, Dragon Ball, stuff like that. And then the more that I get into something, the more their name will stick with me, regardless of where they're from.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do too with how often you say it, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with European names, we say them all the time, so it's not hard to remember like George Mason, because it's a name that's just part of our typical parlance, right? But if you're looking at something like, like Watanabe, right? That's something that's got to stick out to you.
Mm-hmm.
At least because, that the language is not part of, for me, my personal paradigm. I don't know Japanese. I don't use Japanese. I just, seen a couple of Kurosawa films. That's about it, though.
Yeah, Akira Kurosawa is a good director.
Unbelievable.
My favorite manga creator is what's his name? Akira Yoshida. You guys remember him?
His name is familiar, but
C.B. Cebulski.
Oh, right, C.B. Cebulski. That's right, he went by that fake Asian pen name for a while.
That was
with the Marvel Mangaverse, I believe it was called.
Yeah. That's where they created the Big Hero 6 from.
Honestly. Like, that's kind of impressive.
Okay, side note on this, and then I want to get back to that. I've got two sets of questions, but one is, does it strike anyone else as weird that Big Hero 6, for being a big movie that it was, has not been incorporated into the mainstream Marvel universe?
Yeah, in fact, like their main thing is...
Why didn't they do that?
I don't know. Maybe Disney just wanted to keep the brands separate for whatever weird reason.
I think do they put Marvel in the title of the movie and stuff like that? Like, I know they credited a Stan Lee cameo, but
and it was based on a Marvel comic, it said, but
it's nothing like the Marvel comic. But yeah,
no.
I was doing some research on the Big Hero 6 comic, and it's very different from the Disney movie. Like, they took a lot of liberties.
Well, yeah.
What I was going to say is it's one of those things where they did take a lot of liberties, but nothing has been done with the property in 20 years, right? Or almost 20 years. So it's strange to me that they didn't say, well, here we have a winning property. The tweaks have been made so that it's got wide acceptance. Let's make comic books and action figures and all the other kind of stuff. It seems strange to me.
Well, they made a cartoon. But
I'm sorry?
They made a cartoon, but that's about it.
There's an IDW comic series based on the Disney film, but it's like, yeah, I'm kind of surprised that with as popular as it was, that it wasn't incorporated into the main 616 Marvel universe.
Well, and it seems strange for two reasons, really. One, that seems really weird, is that it fills all of those diversity quotients with characters that people really like already, right? So that I don't understand. And the second is it was happening at the same time as they took the Ultimate Universe and folded it into the Marvel
into the main universe. Yeah,
so
that
it
could
would
have been pretty
naturally
well
say, let's go ahead and incorporate this property that already fits in with the new universe. I mean, if we have Miles Morales, then why don't we have Hiro Yoshida? Is that the family?
No. Oh, geez, my girlfriend would skewer me for not remembering it because she loves Big Hero 6, the series as a whole. Not the original stuff, like I'm talking about the Disney reboot. But I was just thinking Hiro Hamada. I think it's Hiro Hamada.
That's it.
You just got Yoshida on the mind.
Terrible with Japanese names. Sorry, Japan.
You got CB Cebulski on the mind.
Probably.
Boy in Chief or whatever his name was for like 3 minutes. Thick Boy in Chief.
Yeah, we don't talk about that. So, but the other thing I was going to talk about is we mentioned Akira Kurosawa earlier, and so Carl, I was going to ask you what your favorite Kurosawa picture was.
I don't have one because while I know he's a great director and I've seen several clips of the movies, I've never seen a movie in full from him. I've seen several clips. I noticed that the composition is great. I've noticed that the acting is also pretty good.
I will tell you, I have only seen one Kurosawa picture front to back, the whole thing, and it's called A Rhapsody in August, and it is about I think it's August, and it's about this family who has the patriarch and matriarch of his family are a couple of Japanese folk that survived the bombings of Nagasaki, right? The second bombing. And she was at their home up in the mountains, and he was down at the factory, and they both lived through the thing and went on to have a family. And it tells a story of the third generation of these children that have grown up with their grandparents who lived through the war and lived through the bombing, and parents who lived in the Reconstructed era and had very different lives from their parents because it was all modernized and very Americanized and that kind of thing. And in the middle of all of this, the parents' cousin, the nephew of the grandparents, who's an American, comes back to visit the family, and it's this really interesting, reserved look at just like a snapshot of life in the early '80s in Japan. It's really, really interesting.
That sounds pretty cool. I'm gonna have to see that.
It's so good. It's so good. So good.
Oh, Carl, have you ever seen those anime movies that were being pushed all over the place last year, like Silent Voice?
No, here's the funny thing. This is gonna ruin my nerd cred a bit. I'm kind of a normie, except not a normie when it comes to anime, especially the movies. Hey, have you seen this? Have you seen this anime movie? No, I haven't. I'm sorry. I can't even pronounce the name.
Well, I mean, like, see, the stuff with anime stuff is there tends to be, if you're not a normie when it comes to anime, you're probably a weeb, and that's even worse.
Yeah, I have to admit, like, I grew up in the '80s, right? So, like, Japanimation was on TV all the time, Pole Position and Voltron and whatever else. And Kimba the Lion, I saw that when I was a little boy.
Lion King original cut.
Yes.
That was also
parts of Lion King that aren't Hamlet are Kimba the Lion. So
that was also a property created by Osamu Tezuka.
Whoa. Really? There I go, learning stuff. But anyway, which I hope I retain that, but it's interesting.
Yes.
But I didn't really get into anime per se until much later. And I had friends that were in. I saw Vampire Hunter D and Akira, and some of those other properties like that. But when I was several years ago, my youngest boy, Taliesin, just fell in love with anime and manga art styling, and this is his favorite look to stuff. And so yeah, I have a friend who's pretty much a weeb, and so I said to him, I say, Barry, well, you've met Barry, Matt. But anyway,
I never knew he was a weeb. I'm gonna have to wash my screen now.
Yeah. He's into that pretty hardcore. But he said, what are some anime that are safe,
kid friendly, not no.
that are exactly, they're kid friendly. I don't want to anybody turning into a squid monster and devouring some man or something. What's going to be kosher? And so he gave us a list of stuff, and My Neighbor Totoro and Porco Rosso and stuff. A lot of the Ghibli films, and we've been watching through those, and there's a lot of really good stuff there.
I love Porco Rosso. That's actually my favorite Ghibli movie.
It's really good.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Is I'm kind of like Carl. I'm very casual into these sort of things because you don't like. It's like I imagine what smoking would be like. You don't want to do it all the time, or otherwise it's going to turn you into, instead of eventually causing health problems or addiction, it turns you into a weeb, which is way worse than any cigarette addiction could ever be. But
that's a very apt analogy. As an occasional smoker, I will tell you that's a very apt analogy.
That's a perfect analogy right there.
If you're into smoking, I mean, if you appreciate the flavor and you appreciate the odor, you want to make sure that you're smoking little enough where it can still be a hobby, not a habit.
Yeah, a hobby, not like a compulsion habit.
Yeah.
But yeah, with anime stuff, my cousin was like, "Oh, here, why don't you watch this show?" I was like, "What's it by?" He's like, "Oh, it's called Kill la Kill."
Oh,
Do you know anything about Kill la Kill, Matt?
I do not.
Okay, so while my cousin described this to me after I looked up some stuff on the show myself, it's a girl who becomes more powerful the less clothes she's wearing.
All right.
Well, do you know what makes that even more awkward? She's like canonically 17 or something, isn't she?
Well, I mean, in Japan, that's 3 years over the age of consent. So
that only makes it worse, not better.
But yeah, like I was kind of like, my cousin, I might need to talk to you a little bit. But yeah, he has shown me some pretty cool stuff. I actually like, people will kill me for saying this, but I don't think it was perfect. But like, I've only watched the first half of the first season of Sword Art Online, and I did find there was a lot of stuff I did like, and I was told that it gets a lot worse after then. And if you just end it when he's walking out of the hospital, it's a lot better. And that's all so that's what I did.
So what was that one? I did not catch the title.
Sword Art
Online. It's a lot of people call it the biggest normie anime. It's basically they say it's the equivalent of Frozen or the equivalent of Fortnite. It's just the biggest, dumbest, easiest anime to say you like. Like it's the it's
Dragon Ball Z.
I don't know. I feel like Dragon Ball still kind of has people really love it in a different sort of way. It's it's also a classic, but
yeah. I can't remember, Matt, if we've ever talked about my feelings toward Dragon Ball, specifically Dragon Ball Z, but I'm not sure that it helped the viewership at all. It's such a beloved property that my opinions might drive people away or start a flame war or something.
You share a juice. I don't know if I don't think I've ever talked to you about Dragon Ball Z, but I've talked to a lot of people with varying opinions on it, so I'm open to hearing yours.
Okay. Well, I will tell you how the story went. When I was, actually, goddamn, when I was your age. This is one of those stories. So when I was your age, Dragon Ball Z was just on Cartoon Network, right? And they had the whole Toonami thing, me and several of my friends would watch it relatively faithfully. And I was watching it, and it's got some really cool mythology, backstory stuff that's built in, and I really enjoyed a lot about that stuff. But one time, the now Mrs. Rhys, who was at the time just my girlfriend, was over to the house. I had a house with a bunch of guys at the time, and we're sitting down there watching the thing, and she says, "Why are you watching the show?" And I said, "Because it's amazing." She says, "Nothing has happened in 20 minutes." And
that describes the show.
The show ended and went on about our day. And I sat there and for the next just day, it just popped into my head every once and again. I'm like, she's right. that show it's 5 minutes of show and 20 minutes of padding every episode.
That was actually done on air intentionally because there was a manga running with it simultaneously, and there was a lot of time where they had to catch up to the manga, so they padded out with filler or with making confrontations go way longer than they did, where the characters are just sitting there like monologuing at each other. Mm-hmm. And it goes on for a really long time. There was a recut version of the show, which I think is the best way to watch the show, which is called Dragon Ball Z Kai. And that just basically, it cuts down on all the filler and it gets right to the point. And to put things in perspective, it went from a show with 300 episodes to 160.
Yeah, all of the essential content was there, but all the unnecessary stuff was completely purged.
Well, there was a couple of I might have to seek that out just to check it out then, because that makes a lot of difference.
It does, trust me. Like me and my little brother, we finished the show this year. We started with the original thing because a lot of purists will tell you that it's the only way to watch the show.
Right.
To them.
I've heard rave reviews of the original. All of my friends who are Dragon Ball fans are just like, no, if you watch the original, you understand Z, and it's totally worth it. And I'm like, I don't know, but okay, I may have to do that.
The original show, like the original Dragon Ball, was a lot goofier, and I still love it. But honestly, you could start with Z. That's what we did. But yeah, Z Kai, it just cuts down on all that filler. What happens in, like, for example, what happens in Funimation's cut of season 2, like the original like all 300 episodes, their season 2 is summed up in 9 episodes in Kai.
Wow.
And the second season fills out everything that happens when they're fighting Frieza. It's really well done, and they also redid the voice cast, with a few exceptions, all returned to reprise their roles and improved upon what they feel like they failed in the past. With some commentary on that from the different voice actors. I loved Dragon Ball Z Kai. It was one of my highlights of last year.
Well, I'll have to check that out. Have you guys seen the I don't know what you call it, but the Samurai 7?
The Samurai 7 anime, or?
Yeah.
Oh, I've seen that. It's really good.
It's amazing. I love that thing. The reason I said what you call it is because it's obviously Samurai 7 as opposed to the 7 Samurai, but also it's kind of a techno punk version of the story, and so it's interesting. I don't know how the stylistic side of it changes it a little bit, but it's a lot of fun.
That was actually one of my first exposures to anime outside of stuff like Dragon Ball. and it was, yeah.
Oh, sorry for interrupting, but do you consider Avatar: The Last Airbender anime, or anime influenced, or what?
I've not seen it. Can't comment.
See, I don't bother with stuff like that. To me, it's just like, okay, what is anime? Well, it's a Japanese cartoon created in Japan for Japanese audiences. So no, Avatar: The Last Airbender is an anime, but does that really matter in the long run?
It doesn't. It gets people really heated, but I feel like it's, some people take a little way too seriously. I feel like I'd count it as anime because it's like it's a really Western attempt at anime. In fact, older Matt, I'd actually really recommend Avatar: The Last Airbender because it doesn't have a lot of the cliches that anime tends to have, and it's got this really cool world with really cool, interesting powers. So yeah, that one I think that's just 3 seasons long, so it's not too hard of it's not too hard of a journey. So yeah, I'd recommend that. But sorry for interrupting you, Carl, about Samurai 7.
No problem. Yeah, Avatar: The Last Airbender is a really, really good show. I think it shows the best of American cartoon writing as well as Korean animation because it was done by a Korean animation studio.
That happened a lot with the early 2000s because the Boondocks was also Korean animated.
So was Ed, Nettie, oddly enough.
Wait, what?
Yeah, Ed, Eddie was animated in Korea. You didn't know that?
Yeah, keyframes were made here, but all the work was done in Korea.
I actually I wasn't allowed to watch Ed, Ed and Eddie as a kid.
That makes sense. It was super subversive.
I looked at I don't know what my mom had this rule, like if she felt like it was too dumb, we weren't allowed to watch it.
My mom had that same rule, and that's why I wasn't allowed to watch SpongeBob as a kid.
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
and that's actually not fair. Because SpongeBob, at least the first 2 seasons,
the first couple seasons were brilliant.
Yeah, it was actually really smart.
They were really smart satire. But the characters weren't necessarily intelligent, but the show was, and that was one of the interesting things about it. Now, from what I've seen of later stuff, they kind of cheat on their own bit so they can keep telling the same damn stories. But that's the first 2 seasons were some of the smartest cartooning to come out of California in a long time. So
I'm thinking about what else. Oh no, Nacho says, "Wow, Americans are strict." And I think we're kind of the exception, not the rule, because I feel like the average family just
see, and here's I'll actually speak to that for just a second from a philosophical perspective. The whole America as a nation is about freedom, right? But freedom can only be maintained if you govern yourself, because governance is inevitable. Somebody's going to govern, whether it's you governing you or whether it's the government coming in and taking your rights and your property, right? So in order to have a self-governing people, children have to learn to govern themselves. And that's why parents have to crack that whip so the government can keep their nose out of it. That's the plan. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's the plan.
My girlfriend says very well, or she says it's a good point, Mr. Rhys.
Well, thank you.
But yeah, what else? I wasn't allowed to watch. My mom had this really strict rule about stupid parents in cartoons. Like that was more because she felt insulted, so we weren't allowed to watch Fairly Odd Parents because of that.
You weren't allowed to watch Fairly Odd Parents,
and
you're not missing anything from my perspective on it. So
that was actually one of the only shows I was allowed to watch as a kid. But do you know what the real irony behind that is?
No.
The creator of the Fairly Odd Parents, Butch Hartman, is a very, very straight-laced, Christian, wholesome family values kind of guy.
Yep.
Oh, geez, there was a ton of lag there. I didn't hear any of that.
Oh. Did either of you hear that?
I heard it.
Okay. I said it was ironic that your mom didn't allow you to watch the Fairly Odd Parents because Butch Hartman is a very morally straight, I guess you could say, actually fairly right-wing Christian guy.
That kind of shocked me because, to me, I almost assume law of averages that every cartoonist is liberal from moderate liberal to Max Visaggio.
Well, that's a lot of cartoonists, but I wouldn't say that's all of them.
I would say, I don't know, it kind of things like Doug TenNapel and Butch Hartman kind of really surprised me when I hear about them.
Well, Doug TenNapel especially, because nothing like that comes through in his work. His work is very bizarre and loose.
Well, I mean, I actually disagree with you. It does, but not in the way you expect. Doug has this ability to tell stories that aren't particularly on the nose. And a lot of people, especially a lot of people that are in Christian arts, they make Christian arts that are very, very overtly beat you over the head almost in their biases, and that tends to hurt art, because what art is is art is a culture holding a mirror up to itself, right? But if it does it too overtly, then the viewer may not actually see themselves in that mirror, and that's one of the problems with making art that's too on the nose. And that's why, like, your Hallmark movies are never going to be, the award winners, because they're too overt with what they're trying to get across. They're feel good for a particular market. They're not actually about explaining that from what you would call art.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which,
very good point.
With Christian and stuff, I think it's funny is I've met a lot of people who were either grew up to be atheist or were atheists all along, but they loved the Veggie Tales. Like, they didn't care for the Christian messages and stuff, but they loved the jokes and the silly songs. And I just think that says something about the quality of the show, that it can be enjoyed by people who do not care or reject the message.
Well, and one of the things that I think is really funny, and this is to try my own biases, but a lot of people that hold the messaging of that off to askance, they still live as though the messages were true. You have because either there's a moral structure to the universe or there's not, right? And so many people that don't want to be judged, that they don't want to imagine that there's a God, they want to live as though they're accountable to anything. They still live that way because they think there's rights and wrongs, and that there's justice or injustice. There are these intangible things. They still live in that way because that's still part of their subtextual worldview, but they don't want to apply that to their life. And that's the thing I think is just really funny about some of that kind of stuff. Because the reason things like VeggieTales or Lord of the Rings or Batman speak to us is because they speak to these intangible, transcendent truths of our reality that we understand are real. But people don't necessarily want to be subject to that because it means they're responsible for their actions. And that's one thing that I think you and I were talking about a couple weeks ago, Matt, is I'm for all of my affectations of gentility, I'm really kind of a dick, and I know that, and I know that I'm not a great person necessarily, but I also know that my value is not based in my goodness; it's based in my station as a creator, as a creation of the Creator, and it's His goodness, if anything, I have. So that's just one of those things I think is really funny when you're talking about that.
Yeah. And all this philosophy and religion coming up in all of a sudden.
That's the kind of thing that can really conversation. So
it is good stuff. It's just like, sometimes it just hits you really hard when you think about the morals and the structures of society and stuff like that, and how people perceive things. I know I was trying to think about or Christian art. I was talking, or one thing I really appreciated, and this is something, this is related to our conversation about religious representation, but in comics, Daredevil, Daredevil is famously Catholic. And one thing that my friend, everybody in my friend circle is Roman Catholic. And we were talking about, my friend comes up to me and says, if you think about Matt Murdock's kind of a really crappy Catholic.
Yes.
He doesn't follow the rules. And one of the things it's actually one of the things I really loved about Matt's character is that he realizes, he's got his problem. He's got, or I think women are his weakness. But, he's not perfect. Like, even though he strives to be, perfect, he's not. And I feel like that's a pretty good representation of the, of Catholicism. Like you come back and you ask for forgiveness over and over. And, you just try to progress to be the best person you can.
I think one of the things I like about the Daredevil character is that, like you talked about, it is very much the practice of a Catholic, where he's trying to live out the truth of his faith. He's trying to live out the truth of his religion in the best way he knows how, which happens to be with his fists, right? And but that idea that constantly questing toward the higher order, I think that's an interesting theme, because on the one hand, he's a crappy Catholic, but on the other hand, all Catholics are crappy Catholics, right? Because that's the point. That's the point of Christian faith, is that we're not good in ourselves. Our goodness is is something that
You
we,
strive for.
God's goodness, hopefully, and if we're good at it, we reflect His righteousness back to Him, and that's something that we're imbued with that because of Christ's great sacrifice, because of His great life, and because of His resurrection, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm Protestant, but that's still part of our theology very much in that too. So we're all Christians are crappy Christians. That's not a secret.
Very true. Very much true.
The other thing I really love about Daredevil comes down to the design. With Frank Miller really brought in a lot of the Catholic stuff. And someone asked him about, it's like, why'd you do this? He said, it only made sense to me that a guy would be a lawyer during the day, or a Catholic man would be a lawyer during the day and dress up as the devil to go beat people up at night. And I feel like that also is kind of like, Born to Kill written on Joker's helmet in Full Metal Jacket. Like, it's the duality of man. And I really like that. It's, people it's kind of just a bold statement of people are a lot more complex than we're led to believe. I feel like we're taught our whole lives, this is bad, this is good. And I feel like that leads to a lot of problems. But, there's a lot of more in between than anyone wants to talk about.
Well, and that's one of the things that's an intrinsic part of the Christian theology too, is that life isn't a moment, right? It's a journey. And you can be righteous, you can do righteous things in the moment, but that doesn't make you a righteous person. Your righteousness is the sum total of your life. And it's one of those things where, it's not that there's a scale that we have more good things than bad things, that there's a trend, as you build a life of righteousness, you grow righteous fruit. And that's one of the things why Jesus uses so many agricultural metaphors in the Gospels, is because it's all about that journey and about that trip on. And I think that's one of those things that, I look at. I mean, it's definitely in Daredevil, but it's also a subtext in, I don't know if you guys ever read Hitman by Garth Ennis, but he's also an Irish Catholic who ends up, using violence more often than not. But his journey is very different because he's not expecting redemption. He's somebody who's done so much violence and death in his life that he expects damnation. So his whole journey is one of taking out abusers and taking out criminals so that other people can live at peace, and expecting that, that judgment is inevitable. And if these people deserve judgment, then they're going to get that in his hand. And that's one of those, it's almost Punisher in it, in the aspect of it, but it's a Punisher with a smile. And that's one of the things I love about that character.
My girlfriend says, I was just telling my sister yesterday that even though the church is the people of God, we're still just that, people.
Yes.
I know that's something I'd say just in general, like even outside the church. I mean, that is a very good point, but people tend to forget that the people you talk to are also human beings. Especially in the digital age.
Yeah, like wasn't it Dan Slott who called a bunch of people pixels that one time? Oh, you're just pixels on a screen or something.
Right, so that I think he was also trying.
And I think there's a reflection that's true that Twitter world is not the real world, right? Mm-hmm. And that we let ourselves be our worst selves some days, right? And
I mean, there's been days tweets where I'm just like so pissed about something, and I just be like, you know what? Is this productive? Does this help anybody? Is this gonna get me fired? Yeah, let's do it.
Trifecta.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm much more conscious about that. I still feel like there's going to be something that I think is totally innocuous now. It's going to get me in trouble, like, way down the line. But that's also because I'm a spurg. So I don't tend to realize these things.
Oh, I understand that fully. I think about that every day.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's also just scary. You see it in the news all the time. Although I feel like I think we were talking about this, Carl, last time, is people are kind of waking up to it. They're seeing that a society of being constantly prudish, and constantly saying, "Oh, you messed up once. There's no room for improvement. You're gone. Get out. Don't come back. Have fun working at McDonald's." A lot of people see that and they're like, "This isn't really fair." People have a chance to change and grow. And you see these comments more and more. The more of these controversies come out, you'll see more people saying, "Come on, it was like 5 years ago when this guy said this. He said he's learned a lot since then. It was one time, or it was like 3 times or something like that. Very, it's not really a whole lot when you put it in perspective. People change. Let's forgive people rather than just throw out everybody.
Yeah, and I think we a lot of times we've reached a point in society where we forget about grace, right? And I think you and I have talked about that, Matt. That's one of the things that I think that it's so easy to latch onto, and I think part of that's the politically correct that language aspect of our culture is in right now, where we hold certain things as unforgivable, as taboo.
Unforgivable, yeah. Like, I mean, that's the thing is, I'd never like to downplay, horrible things like racism or bigotry, but I also feel like these things, sometimes kids or even adults are raised in very different environments and they clash with overall what society is saying. So we need to kind of like, I'd say if you're just meeting somebody, kind of treat them from a place of ignorance, like not in a way that they're ignorant and stupid, but they're like, they haven't been, or like you haven't, like they haven't thought of things from another perspective, and you teach them, they learn, they move on, and what's in the past is in the past. But everything now is, if you weren't 100% in support of gay marriage for the past 20 years, you're unforgivable and deserve to die. Like, it's really
last president.
Nacho,
he gets a pass.
But yeah, Nacho says, when I was 4, I didn't pray, and I was told to stand in the corner of the room. It sounds like, oh man, I guess I would get in trouble for that, but I imagine it was kind of a very different thing. I have heard stories about that where the kids went to Christian schools and they didn't really necessarily believe in God or Christianity, and they got punished.
Yeah, that's I don't know. That's one of the problems with formal schools. But we all schools. So.
Matt, we're different though. We're homeschools. We're just visiting this planet.
So, back to you, Carl. Getting to know a little better about we talked about getting into anime, getting into Japanese manga, and in terms of comics and comic strips. What is your favorite comic strip?
My favorite comic strip of all time.
Sure.
Well, let's see. Are we using like qualifiers here, like favorite adventure strip, favorite comedy strip, or are we just going any strip at all?
Just say Calvin.
Any strip at all. Well, okay. Is it too normie of a thing to say something like Calvin and Hobbes?
Yeah, that's what I was just say. I say Calvin and Hobbes and get it over with.
Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes or Peanuts, or if we're going like mystery or adventure, something like Dick Tracy for like the adventure thing.
Yeah. Side question: actually, I've got 2 questions in terms of the adventure thing. 1, have you ever read Terry and the Pirates? And 2, are you checking out the new Dick Tracy comic that IDW is putting out right now?
I'm probably going to check out the IDW Dick Tracy comic, and I don't think I've read Terry and the Pirates.
Terry and the Pirates was one of the longest running adventure strips until it ran from like the 30s up until like the mid 90s. I didn't follow it religiously or anything, but it is some fun stuff. It's like Pirates of the Caribbean, but a comic strip, right? It's got comedy, it's got action, adventure, it's got whimsy, but it's also got some real serious, heavy themes. It's good stuff. If you get a chance, I mean, they did an omnibus collection of it. I want to say it was in like 2003, but it was like $80. But it's some fun stuff. But yeah, the IDW Dick Tracy that's being done by Lee and Mike Allred is just, and some other people too. I can't remember their names on it, but I follow Lee and Mike on Twitter, so I remember their names. And also I've been acquainted with Mike Allred's stuff for 25 years.
You guys, how do you guys feel about IDW right now? Like, they've had the really bad things.
It's such a damn mixed bag.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
That's exactly what I was about to say. It's a mixed bag. It's half and half.
I don't know. I love the properties they have.
Their good stuff is amazing, and their other stuff is not amazing.
It could range from like okay to oh my god, I can't believe they printed this.
Yeah, their good stuff is
Like,
I like to say is I won't give them money because some of their faux pas are just beyond the pale, but their good stuff is just so good.
there were what did they publish? Of course, one of my favorite monthly series is the current TMNT comic that's actually written by Kevin Eastman himself, the co-creator of Ninja Turtles. And he's still working on it. He's still pretty happy to be working on it, as far as I can tell. Like, he talks about it at conventions and he shows off his ideas. He's like saying that this is probably one of the more experimental runs with Turtles that he gets to do, and just to be kind of part of a TMNT run that's still running from the straight from the horse's mouth. That makes me really happy, especially as a longtime Turtles fan. I've been having a ball with that series.
I've heard really good things about that one.
It's kind of hard to get into if you're not into piracy, which I'm not, but I know a lot of people are. But there's we're on issue 86 right now. So for me, it's worth it because I'm a diehard TMNT fan. I'm really happy to see Eastman's name on it, and I feel like he's doing a pretty good job. And I'm liking this different take on the characters. Nachos. Speaking of thoughts on current comic situations, Nachos brings up thoughts on Donny Cates and what he's talked about in the past couple days.
Man, I don't know if I want to get into that. I don't know. It's weird because
I don't feel like he was nearly as horrible as some of the other people. What's his name? Remember Frank Cho when Frank Cho got visceral, and then when Ethan Van Sciver said very calmly, it's I don't know if this seems kind of like he was really forced to say something. He went on, and I'm not going to say all the stuff that he said, but in a follow-up post he wrote, Ethan Van Sciver, I hope you can grab some salad tongs, reach into Robbie Rodriguez's rectum, and pull out a turd and suck on it for the rest of your life. And to me, that just kind of blew my mind because it was Frank Cho, what the heck?
Yeah.
Why do these people think of half these things? That sounds like me in high school, when you're really mad and you think disturbing things.
Yeah.
I don't know, when you're in high school and you're really edgy, that's what I'm thinking about. That sounds like you're out of high school.
Oh yeah, I didn't even attend any kind of public high school or anything, and I had that syndrome as well.
Or I don't know. I feel like I grew a lot as a person over high school from realizing, I was talking to Rhys about a couple weeks ago. I'm pretty laid back when it comes to good people, bad people. I think there's good people, there's bad people in the world. Just try to be the best person you can be. But at the time, I was like, no, this makes you bad. These little mistakes make you bad. And thankfully, I learned life is much more complex than that.
See, and I actually kind of take it the other way. I think that everyone's bad. The standard of good is
transcendentalism. Is that the term for it?
Well, transcendentalism usually talks about Eastern theology, a lot of Hindu thought.
Yeah, but I've heard the term applied to the kind of Western Christian viewpoints. Is there's transcendentalist and there's non-transcendentalist, or anti-transcendentalist, which is essentially the opposite. You have everyone is good, and then the bad people deviate from goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I hadn't actually heard in those terms before, but I'm familiar with the ideas. But I would argue that I think the standard of what is righteousness is so high that none of us are up there. We're all down here in the dirt.
Agree.
There's lots of room to be gracious to the people who make mistakes and who fault because you're also a dick. So
it kind of reminds me. I think it was the Lutheran churches. The founder wasn't his name also Martin Luther? Well, he had said the quote or something. It's we are all piles of dung, and we can the best that will ever become of us is that some snow will fall on us and we might look a little nicer. It's like,
That's
man,
a really good quote.
Oh, geez. Anyway, yeah, I think my girlfriend just responded to. I think she was talking about the quote from Frank Cho, where he had said the Ethan Van Sciver, and she said, "Oh gosh."
Yeah, that's pretty.
I'm not surprised when they say stuff like this. Like, these don't sound like adults. These, like I said, these sound like teenagers just thinking of the nastiest, edgiest thing they can say to each other.
Well, I mean, that's part of it. The other thing is you got to realize that, like, and this is no disrespect to President Company at all, but artists are by nature not well adjusted, right? That's what it is. And I think I don't know if you guys ever listened to Andrew Clavin at all, but one of the things he talks about is that artists spend so much time in their own heads thinking about meaning and all that kind of stuff that there's this separation between lived experience and your experience by your lonesome in your studio. Those aren't the same thing. And then when you add the internet into that to mix, where you can be by yourself for hours at a time, except for Twitter, your ability to regulate human value just goes straight out the window. So, and I don't think that is exclusive to any one, political or philosophic category either, because there are some people that I agree with a lot that still end up in the same sorts of saying just horrible things without, devoid of grace. Right?
Yeah.
Nacho brings up Michelle Perez wishing like death on people or wishing death on diversity comics and wanting to cripple him several times. I think that's like I put her in a separate box because she seems like a person with genuine mental issues. Like I'm not trying to make fun of her. She seems like a person who has, or I don't know. See, there's stuff like a lot of these other people are just being like really edgy and immature. That almost seems like there's a problem with her in a mental sort.
Well, mental health is a spectrum. I mean, it's not something that. I mean, there's brokenness, there is corrupt thinking, there is all that stuff in all of us. When we feed it, right, when we encourage those behaviors, we teach our brains to think in that way. Our brains think in that way and continue to think in that way. And that's one of those things where, in a I think proverb it talks about, iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens the countenance of another, right? That's important to rub up against people that encourage you to think well and to be cautious and to be mindful and be gracious, because left to our own devices, we all become the worst versions of us, And I think that, like I said, I think that's a particular danger for people that live the artist lifestyle, because we spend so much time inside of our own heads. And there seems to be a correlation between people that are a little bit sick and want to get into the arts anyway. I think it's especially true of the performing arts, but I think it's true of other arts as well.
Yeah, Nachos brings up, he says, I like Mags, though. I've gotten along with her when I've tweeted to her. And see, that's the interesting thing is I've actually seen Mags in person. Like, I've actually walked by her at Baltimore Comic-Con. And she seems very happy and very, like, see, that's the thing is, like, online, she, like, she tweets some crazy stuff. Like, she can look like a mad woman. But, like, but I've seen like little clips and things of her, and she like I think there is a really nice person there. And from what I've heard from the inside, or like from different videos and people talking about it, like she needs a PR person, or she needs to really tone herself down on Twitter. But she like in person, she's actually nice and she's fun to hang around. But on Twitter, you wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
If you guys saw, I was in a conversation about Twitter the other day, about the Twitter itself, and I think Twitter is if you were to compare the internet and social media to alcohol, right? That's all alcohol. Twitter is bathtub gin. It is Everclear. It is hard stuff. Not everybody can drink the hard stuff. Some people, they're just addicts, and they should avoid it altogether. And and I think that's one of the big things about it is for a lot of people, they get too much of it. It's a I mean, that's one of the things is, I mean, even scientifically, every time you log on to Twitter is a dopamine hit. Every time somebody comments and likes it, it puts off that positive response in your brain. And for some people that they get hooked on it. So positive, negative, whatever it is, they get into these like back in the message board days, we called them flame wars. I'm not sure if anyone uses that term anymore.
It still gets used every once in a while.
It gets you revved up on the inside, and it feels good, even if you're mad. And that's one of the things for some people. That's the drug, and they should avoid social media for that specific reason.
Yeah, especially Twitter. Like, I mean, Facebook is a little different. Although I also feel like Facebook brings out some sides of people that you wouldn't expect. But it's also because you have to think about what every individual person is exposed to. Like, people are going to be really angry all the time on Twitter if they follow a lot of people who are tweeting about things that would get you angry. And they're going to see the world very differently. So when they comment on the world, they're coming from a very different perspective than people like me who, I just want to follow, like, for the most part, I like to follow people like you and Carl and anyone else who doesn't insult me, but cartoonists. I love comics and cartoons. I love to read these things from people. And, it can seem very stressful when it gets all swept up in drama, but I mean, ultimately it's about what you surround yourself with. It's the environment you create for yourself.
So, okay. I'm sorry, you have somebody's comment there, Matt?
Oh yeah, Nacho's saying, talking about Comic Pros. He says, I completely refuse to buy comics from Mark Waid and Jeff Lemire, which is a shame because I love Doctor Strange and Sentry. Waid does Doctor Strange right now? Is that what he's doing?
I think Waid is. I think he is.
I don't like touching Marvel with a 39.5-foot pole.
Merry Christmas.
I still got to get some of that out. Mark Waid, ever since
12th night's not till Sunday. Get it out.
Yeah. Mark Waid, see, like, ever since all this stuff blew up, and ever since I really learned about the type of person he is online, it's really hard to, like, even in retrospect, like, there was some stuff I liked. Like, I thought his Daredevil run was goofy fun, which was an interesting take on the character. Like, it's not my definitive favorite take, but it was kind of a fun sidetrack to get into. But now looking back on his it's just hard to see anything. Like, his Captain America run recently, which, people are saying it started out really promising and then it turned into what it did. It makes it hard to look at even his backlog.
Yeah. With Captain America, 3 issues in. On my other channel, the Comics RX, actually have a video about that. And he betrays the premise of his story within 3 issues. It's a shame because he started out especially that first one there was some propaganda in it, but it still was a solid Cap story. And then it was in 3 issues. He totally betrayed the premise of his entire thesis, and it was shameful. But I read Waid back on the Flash way back in the day, and I love his Flash still. The Return of Barry Allen was the story, but it wasn't actually, spoiler alert, Barry Allen. They addressed that later on when Barry really did come back from the dead, which I still think was a mistake, but that's okay, I guess. But yeah, it was his stuff back then, and creating Impulse, just some really, or co-creating Impulse anyway. There's some really good stuff. And I can't, to sound weird about it, I don't think you can take that away from me. But guy's still sort of a dick. But once again,
he's gone a little beyond that with some of the stuff he pulls. Like, I don't want to get because I try to keep our stream kind of like PG-13-ish, like when I can. I don't know just why, because my parents keep asking. It's like, oh, we should tune in sometime, and like I'm just like, oh God, what have I said? Got to scan over everything I've ever said on this channel. Yeah, Mark Waid is, especially lately over the past year, has he went from being just a dick into being something much, much worse.
Yeah, criminal.
Yeah, like Yeah, like I mean, I honestly think he has a very strong case set against him. Like what he did, especially with his influence over the industry. Like I feel like he's kind of walked himself into a situation he's not going to walk away happy from.
And here's the thing and here's the thing about that that's really funny, and just not to get too far in the weeds, not to tell too much. There's a lot of other streams that people happen to be interested. There are a lot of other videos about it. There are a lot of news articles written about it. But there is one piece of evidence that, if it exists, that it's an open and shut case. And that's if Joe Dunn gets take his stands and say, yes, I got a call from Mark Wade, and yes, I canceled my contract because of Mark Wade's influence. That's it. That's done. That's that one piece. All the rest of it, none of it's going to matter. That one piece of evidence, if that's true, if that happens, that case is over.
Has anyone ever talked about when the case is actually supposed to go on? Because
I did see that the court date got moved back to March after discovery. They put a petition in November for mutual discovery for stuff, and then they'll have their first hearing before a judge, should be in March after that.
The delay there, yeah.
Well, that's the way those things go. I mean, it's civil court. That's how it is. So
let's see. So girlfriend's laughing says, yeah, your grandma wanted to tune in, right, McGibson? She says, I don't think I've ever called you by your last name. And come to think of it, that's true. Let's see. And then Nacho says, I call him Young Matt. Well, I mean, just go the extra mile for an 80s reference. Call me Little Matt, like the NES character.
You mean Lil Mac?
Little Mac. It's close enough. It's like 2 letters off. I've actually heard people. What is Mac what is Mac the short version of?
So, it's Mac is son. It's the Irish word for son, or Gaelic, I should say, because it's true in Ireland or Scotland, but it's for son.
Yeah, the funny thing is, most of the time I'm actually referred to as Big Matt. Like every time, there's always been, of course, like another Matthew. So like when I was on the football team back in high school and stuff like that, people called me Big Matt because I was bigger than the other kids. Like I'm not heavy set, is how I describe myself, but you know, I'm 6'2" and they're not.
Yeah. I also am 6'2", but so
I'm jealous.
Yeah, how small are you then, Carl?
I'm not exactly short or anything, but I don't think I'm 6'2". I'm a bit below that. I'm like 5'10" or something, like 5'10" to 6, somewhere in that range. It's not too bad.
The downside of being 6'2", because Matt will probably back me up on this. You're just tall enough where you get to pay $2 extra for clothes, but not tall enough for everyone to say, "Wow, you're really tall."
Yeah, I know. But I don't know. One thing that my dad says,
very top edge of average.
My dad describes me as like Dr. Doofenshmirtz in the sense that I would be taller, but I slouch.
Yeah, it's pretty common for folks of our height.
Well, it's also, I think, from our lifestyle, like, you know, we're bent over reading comic books and playing video games and working on a computer, and it plays into, like, it becomes second nature.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So, Carl, your stuff. I want to divert away from the fan talk a little bit, because you, of course, are yourself an artist.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool classic American cartoony style, right?
Yes.
Where did you pull that out from?
Well, when I was a kid, I grew up watching VHS tapes of Mickey shorts. A lot of them were older, and the one that really stood out to me was the very first one, Steamboat Willie. And eventually, on TV, one day I discovered Boomerang, which had all the classic Tom and Jerry's and whatnot, and even like it went back as far as like the Fleischer Brothers Popeye stuff, and that stuff just hooked me because it was so well animated and expressive, and it was also, in spite of being TVG, it was a lot. It tended to be a lot edgier than the TVY7 shows.
Oh yeah,
especially Popeye, and that just kind of hooked me as a kid. I loved it.
Yeah. So are you familiar with the like the Max Fleischer Superman cartoons and that kind of stuff?
Yes, the 40s Superman cartoons are amazing.
Hmm. They are indeed. The crazy thing about those, and what's amazing, is part of the look that they have for that. They have because they actually rotoscoped it, right?
Yeah.
And that's phenomenal when you think about it. That they actually had actors act it out so they could trace over it and get the image that they wanted. And that was so much of that style is what gave us the Batman the Animated Series look, because it was made to match the be a or at least be a take on the Max Fleischer cartoons.
Yes, and it really, really shows in Batman the Animated Series.
It's great, and I think for my money, I mean, of course, I was a kid when those were coming out, so that was formative for me. But I think also in a lot of ways, that's some of the most definitive um, versions of Batman that you have. I mean, that really like nailed down what the character ought to be.
You guys see what I was sharing earlier with Mark Hamill, and they actually pulled him in, and they had all the different Batman villain voice actors from the animated series, and they're playing Pokemon cards, or they're playing Pokemon Go Fish. There was a little cartoon from Warner Brother from Kids WB. And it was like Mark Hamill going like, "Oh look, 4 Pikachus." You know, you're like, oh no, the fact that he read that off just made me really happy.
No, I did not see that. That's fun.
Well, I believe they repurposed animation from the episode.
Almost got him.
Yeah, they repurposed animation from that and superimposed the playing cards with Pokemon images, but it was still pretty charming to watch.
I loved it. My favorite part of it was Killer Croc just was like, no, I've got a Squirtle. And then like you can hear Harvey Dent over talking. There's a bunch of voices talking at once, but Harvey Dent says like, that's a Vulpix. And I like they made Killer Croc. Like, I mean, Killer Croc I've never really thought of as being really stupid, but I've always thought of him as just being like he's not as smart as everybody else. Like he's street smart, or really strong, or he's really good at intimidation, rather. But I never thought of him as stupid as he was portrayed in the animated series. But for example, in the Arkham games, like he's not really stupid. He's just kind of the muscle.
He's talking about. I spaced off for a second. Were you talking about Killer Croc?
Killer Croc.
One of the things that's really interesting about his journey in the comics is when he was first introduced, he was introduced as King Croc and was a mob boss. Waylon Jones had been like an enforcer who basically blackmailed and beat his way into the head of a particular syndicate, and they were moving in Gotham. And that was actually in the storyline that introduced Jason Todd in his first origin back in '84, I want to say. And so he was originally designed to be a real crafty guy who just had a skin condition.
I always thought that was so funny, and when I laugh about that is I remember the first episode of Invader Zim where they're like, he has green skin, and he's just like, quiet, insolent fool, boy. It's a skin condition.
Yeah.
And my friends actually had a laugh about that for the longest time. I always thought it was silly, the idea of him being, it's like, oh, evolution just went backwards and he's now a Gator Man.
Yeah.
Like this one.
I prefer the original because I think it makes a little more sense in the context. But there is something about the giant, the big gator monster there's an appeal to that, just because there's been a long tradition of monsters inside of the Batman mythos.
Scott just came in. He says, I'm late. Holy feces. Sorry, I was playing Insomniac Spider-Man. And yeah, I'm going to be a little jealous of him right now. I really wish I had a PS4 just for that game. That looks super good.
The first video game that I really got into as an adult was Neversoft Spider-Man back on the PS2.
Oh geez, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I played the heck out of that. I had problems at work for playing that game too late at night, too many nights. So,
wasn't that the one based on the Tobey Maguire movie, or
it was the one before the Tobey Maguire movie came out? So they reskinned it and released it as the movie game, and they changed up the adventure a little bit. But it was the same engine. My understanding is they released Spider-Man the movie, and then when they released the sequel game, Spider-Man 2, that had a more open sandbox world. It was the movie costume, but it was the Rise of Electro, and it was technically the sequel to the original game, not to the Spider-Man the movie game, even though it was the Spider-Man movie costume. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's
good.
Well, video games have a weird track record with sort of sequels like that.
Mm. So do Marvel.
Oh, yeah, repurpose things and stuff like that.
Well, the crazy thing is that there were several Capcom games that were originally intended to be Resident Evil games, and then they ended up becoming new games entirely on their own.
Really? I guess I did not know that.
For example, Onimusha was originally going to be a spin-off of Resident Evil where you fought zombies in an old samurai castle in Japan. They decided to change the game into a game where you fought demons instead and decided to make an entirely new IP out of it.
I also love when they repurpose games. Like I think we were talking about this on the House Party Edition, Carl, but when they that Kirby's Avalanche and Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine are just Puyo Puyo.
Yeah, they're just Puyo Pop.
Yeah. I think that's just interesting that, like, they're like, oh, little do they know little anime girls weren't going to be popular at the time. But, so like, oh, what do people like? Oh, they like Sonic. And, oh, they like Kirby. Let's just repurpose this game. Like, it's the same game, but got different skins on it.
Well, that's what happened with what we call Super Mario Brothers 2.
Right? Doki Doki Panic. Yeah. So, I think it's funny how, because the actual Mario Brothers 2 from Japan looks ludicrous. Like, it doesn't even look fun. It just looks evil.
Yeah, the Lost Levels, we call it.
The Lost Levels.
Yeah, I've seen it. I had the opportunity to purchase it on the Wii Network a decade ago, and I was like, no.
Do I really want to torture myself?
I don't even like platform games. So it's like, yeah. And my kids were just like, they were very young then, right? I mean, they were 7 and 5. They're like, but Dad, it's Mario. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not putting money on that.
There were so many games with the Wii Network that I was introduced to, like I was too young and I missed them, like Super Nintendo games and Wii and NES games that I was introduced to because of the Virtual Console, and I was so happy about them. Like Super Metroid, that actually kicked off my love for Metroid. It was on sale once. I think this was on the Wii U Virtual Console, so a little bit further ahead, but not too far. They were doing this sale where, since it was 30 years, the 30-year anniversary of the Famicom releasing in Japan, that's the Japanese NES.
Right.
And they had the sale. It's like for 30 cents, you can get these classic games from our library that we think represent the best of Nintendo. And the one that I got on was Super Metroid, and that was the best 30 cents I've ever spent. So Scott actually said something back here that I thought was very funny, which is he says, talk about the Insomniac Spider-Man game. He says, the story is very, very good. If you ask me, it's amazing, nearly spectacular, and has a little bit of the ultimate influence. And, I actually did something very similar with my review of Spider-Verse, or my tweets about it, where I'd said, the animation is amazing, the something else is spectacular, and it's superior to most of its peers. And there's Nacho saying it's superior to the other Spider-Man games. You got it in there. Talking about they talk about Dr. Doom, or the Doom suit. Is what he's calling it. Yeah, that looks like a great game. I mean, it looks like it fills the gap in my heart that the Arkham games left, since they've stopped making those. But oh man.
So, Carl, changing subjects again here, wanting to go back to it because we keep veering off here.
Keep veering off, yeah.
In your cartooning style, are there any particular projects that you're working on?
Oh yeah, I'm working on a webcomic called Wholegrave currently.
Okay, and is that like being published right now?
I have the first part up on Tapas.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily really proud of the art in the first part, but that's just the perfectionist.
Are you going to go back and change later, or are you just leaving it as it is and letting the project grow?
I think I'm just going to leave it as is and move on. That's the best thing I can do. Focus all my efforts on making the second, third, and fourth parts of the story better.
How long did it take for you to finish the first act of Wholegrave, Carl?
Well, that's tricky to say because first I had to develop the concept. So if we're counting developing the concept, a little over a year. But if we're talking about not developing the concept, then I'd say about half a year, and then like a 1 or 2 months to put all the finishing touches on the pages and edit everything properly and post it online.
The the other thing I think is really you're worried about, it's like, oh, I'm not so proud of this right now. And let me just say from the customer's perspective, or rather since it's free, like, you know, the reader's perspective, I actually, one of my favorite things about webcomics is watching the improvements over time. Like, I mean, have you ever heard of the internet comic Penny Arcade?
No.
Oh yes.
It's not that great, but anyway, one of the
careful when you say that too. They're an industry.
I mean, yeah, I have nothing but respect from what they've been able to pull out of it, but it's like, I'm not a big fan of the script itself, but his art, like the art of that comic strip has improved so much since when it launched in 1998 that you know, it's just mind-boggling, and it kind of feels like you, the reader, are taking a journey with the artists as they develop over time, and that's one of my favorite things that only web comics can bring you. Like, you know, paid comics, you're getting the best of the best, so these guys were good to begin with. But you know, when it comes to web comics, you're watching them grow over time, and that's part of the entertainment.
Well, you know, Matt, if you're really into watching artists grow, I have an entire webcomic full of that.
I know.
So
I've been taking the right time to read everyone's comics lately. Like both the comics that I have from the store and then the comics from you guys. Like, I'm not going to be able to read all of yours because, you know, you have 10 years worth of stuff. Like, I'm going to have to get through that slowly. But when it comes to Carl, you know, Carl's only got his one issue or his one act up right now. And, you know, Freak of Nature is only 5 issues in. So it's going to be easy. Like, those guys, it's going to be easy to catch up with. But, you know, you've got the, you know, you've got like quite the backlog.
Yes, we do.
Nacho says, I respect cartoonist art. I think it's really difficult, and I only do detailed art. See, I'm the opposite. I like drawing cartoons because I don't like drawing actual realistic figures.
Well, the hard thing to do is that it's easy to do cartoons like wrong, right? Like to get it to be simple and evocative is quite a challenge. And so when you have somebody who's a really, really good cartoonist, it really shines through on that. I see that we have just been joined by Matt Trinh. Thanks for coming on, Matt.
Cricket.
Is he there?
I think he might just be having some mic problems.
He might be having some mic problems. We're just going to pretend like he's not there, like that that ridiculous and the top introduction didn't happen, and we're just going to keep talking. We'll see what happens.
Let's see.
Just a bit of a problem.
Let's see. Scott does say, give issue a slight correction. He says Freak of Nature is currently 15 parts on Webtoons. Yeah, but I kind of break it down into being much smaller because there's 5 episodes total right now, and then a couple of short little specials for different holidays and like different announcements and stuff like that. So I'd really kind of break it down into being primarily 5 episodes.
Yeah, Freak of Nature is pretty easy to get caught up with. I know because I only started like I caught up in like December. I started in December and caught up almost immediately.
Well, yeah, like I mean, you get through it pretty fast. Like it can look like because there's all those announcements and stuff, it can look a little daunting, but you get through it pretty quickly. I think I'm at issue 4 right now, and I'm embarrassed to say it because I love Zach's stuff. I think he does a phenomenal job. He's one of my favorite artists in our circle. But you know, sometimes just like with the real comics and video games and everything else, you do fall behind. But
Yeah,
his stuff, it's very easy to read. You fly through the pages. It's a lot of fun.
I love the way he designs his characters.
I like it too, like especially when he redesigns memes and stuff like that. Like what he did, what he did the wide neck. It's like a wall. Danielle, my girlfriend, says in one of my high school art classes, my teacher said that they didn't want us to draw realistically and said, "I do not want you," or they wanted us to draw realistically and said, "I don't want you guys drawing cartoons." I dropped the class soon after, she says. To me, that's my recent art class. For the longest time, I was kind of like chugging along because I was just sitting there drawing realistic figures, and eventually, it just like I just started drawing for fun one day. I was like, I'm done with this. I started drawing some of my cartoons, and the teacher asked us, and I completely forgot that week. She said, "Now, what have you guys worked on in your free time?" Because she wants us to do these free time drawings. And the only thing new in my book that I had was this cartoon sketch that I wasn't even confident in sharing yet. And I showed it to her. She loved it so much that she said, "You know, if you want to draw like this for the rest of the class, you have like my special permission." So that made me very happy.
It is really cool.
That's nice.
Nachos says, "I love all art. Scotty Young is a great example of cartoon art. But if you check out his website, then he does some amazing detailed art too." Scotty Young, I'll say it like I've said it once, I'll say it a billion times. Scotty Young is one of the greatest cartoonists on the earth right now, or at the very least, one of my favorites.
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot of like the really, really great artists out there can do both. They can do both a cartoony style and a realistic style, or a heightened realism.
See, that's what I like to do, stylized. Like when I try to draw actual people with real proportions, I try to make it kind of stylized.
Yeah, heightened realism.
It's just more fun to do. I don't know. I just don't get a kick out of normal people.
Same.
Have we gotten any word from Matt?
Let me see. Not yet.
Hmm.
See if you can get a hold of him on Twitter or something.
Yeah. I still see him in the thing. It's a USB issue. He can't get his microphone to sync up right.
Oh wait, there's a little chat bubble here in the.
Yeah, you didn't know you could do that?
Well, I mean, I also didn't know you needed to be cleared for streaming and then crashed on your couch. So,
McGibson,
how much I know.
do you read the internet?
I did it once, and then I decided I'm a better person than that. I need to, I'm in charge of this house.
We need to start calling you McBoomer.
I think that's how my sister described me. She's like, "Matt, you're like a 65-year-old man trapped in a 19-year-old's body."
Yeah, I've been 40 on the inside for at least 20 years.
I feel like sometimes. Let's see. Talking about caricatures. What was I? Oh, writing. So Nasser actually brought this up, and Scott had a really smart response on Twitter. Nasser had said, "I've written like 1 million words this year," or something like that. And Nasser likes to say this a lot. And one thing I've always wanted to say to Nasser, or like, not to be derogatory or anything like that, but just because, let me see if I can find Scott's response to it, because I actually really liked it.
I like Nasser as a person.
I like Nasser. I think he's a really nice guy. So yeah, it says, from May to December, I wrote 250,000 words. My goal this year is 500,000. And Scott says 500,000 words doesn't really mean anything. Those are just words. What you should focus on what the words create. 500,000 words is pointless if you don't make something out of them. And I feel like that's really important. Because you can. I feel like when you write those 500,000 words, like a lot of that's going to be. I feel like at least in my experience, you're only going to use like 20% of those. Like there's so much stuff in my projects and stuff that I throw out and say like hold on to this. This is not good. But I really like what he says there, because it is true. Like make sure like it doesn't really matter if you've got 1,000,000 words or just 5. Like if there's a lot of quality there, that's what's going to carry the story in the end.
Yeah, I would agree with that entirely. It is something of a challenge to find to turn an idea into something, though. And
I'd say that's one of the hardest parts. Is like someone said that anyone can have ideas, but what separates the good writers from everyone else, or what separates a writer from everyone else, is how well they turn that idea into a story or into something that catches your eye.
And the other side of that equation too is the remember who said it, that talent is as common as dirt, but that it takes something to turn it on. It's not just about talent; it's about actually sitting down and making it happen. And so,
yeah, that's what I mean. Something I can appreciate is I try to actually create.
Who's written, talking about Nasser, someone who's written 250,000 words. Yeah, how many projects has he got in the can, though? I mean,
I've always wondered about that because Nasser, like he loves to talk about how much he writes, but I'm wondering,
he's had,
from a creative mind, does he like not use?
This last year, he self-published 2 books on Amazon.
That's really impressive by his age as well.
Yeah, and then Stardust, which was self-published, and there of course Brutus the Badass is in production and nearing the finish line, if I understand correctly.
See, that's the thing I really love about Donald is where like I've talked about this before. I do love Youth Man Skyberry a whole lot, but I did not appreciate the huge delay. From a fan and customer standpoint, I did not like the delay. I did not like the shift to focus to making these Star Wars videos all the time. But one thing I've loved with Donald and or a little bit with Nasser, but a lot of Donald's a lot that has to do the heavy lifting now that the writing's all done. Donald's got to draw it all, but he keeps you updated regularly. He streams him drawing pages regularly. And he works very consistently to get this book done, and he shows you that he's not just goofing around. Which again, like I have nothing but respect for Ethan Van Sciver, but I do have some criticisms.
And those are very fair criticisms with which I agree.
Yeah, I can't agree from a customer's perspective because I have exactly this much interest in cyber fraud.
Oh, really? Cyber fraud is one of my most anticipated because it looks like this like trippy cybernetic Battletoads. Like I know people love to bash it.
Here's my thing on it. When he first started talking about his cyber fraud project, his thing was, we have all of this stuff. It hasn't been printed in forever. I've gotten copies of all of my old stuff. We're thinking about releasing a trade of everything, and it's gonna be really cool. And I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds really neat. And then he was like, everybody, brand new story, fund it. I'm like, I don't care about these characters. Why the hell would I care about the situation you put them into?
That was kind of the opposite of me. Like I saw Cyberfrog and I saw some of his concept pages and stuff like that, and like snippets from 2 decades ago, and I was like, wow, this looks like a character I'd actually love to see again.
See, thing is I think there's a market for people to see it again, but I've never seen it, right? So if you want to sell me on a character, introduce me to the character. Don't tell me, here's a story midway down the thing, right?
I do feel like rebooting it when there's not kind of starting midway into something when it's been a long time. Hopefully he does his writing will kind of not leave you in such a strange spot. But I feel like he does a pretty good job. Just me, the concept alone as well as some of the imagery has kind of brought me in already. Scott says Nasser has as many stories in the can as Rhys has Aquaman comics.
That's not true. Well, it might be close. I have a lot of Aquaman comics.
The Nacho says, I see people getting annoyed at diversity in comics or whatever he's calling himself. Now think about comics. Do not like that name as much, just because I've become so accustomed to calling him DNC that
Just call him Zach.
is Zach, or that's the easy way of saying it. But people are getting annoyed at him for taking ages, and I see a lot of those memes and the jokes and stuff like that. And like honestly, I'm kind of there. Like I mean, again, I have a lot of respect for him, especially since he is actually making progress towards his goals. But he is taking longer than I thought he would. From a customer's perspective, again, I'm not really a big fan of the idea of starting another one. Like, he's got his one project, then he starts another one. The other one that started the Iron Sights, that started second. That gets funded and finished first and shipped out. And and I'd much rather just that he release them in the order that I have no problem because he's the writer, and the shipper, I guess, and the shipping guy. But if he released Jawbreakers and then Iron Sights came after, I don't like him dropping everything and going straight to Iron Sights.
Well, part of that is that's not actually the course of events. Iron Sights was in production before Jawbreakers ever was, because
that is right. That
paid for by the Patreon thing. So
that is correct. So I guess I'll admit being wrong in that sense, but I guess from an outsider's
perspective, I mean, the one thing is for the sake of the crowd fund, I can see that. But I mean, the ironic thing is, even if he would have waited to crowd fund Iron Sights until even a couple of months after, it still would have shipped first because the art was nearly finished.
Yeah, because
working on it since 2017.
Remember that Canales. Did he? I don't know if he ever got unbanned on Twitter, but he was working on. I remember seeing he was working on that for ages.
Yeah, he started working on it in 2017. What got it banned on Twitter was that he likes to stir the pot.
I've seen that firsthand.
he loves to kick hornets' nests, and that's the funny thing. I mean, it's just what it is. So
yeah. Let's see, but yeah, I do wish that these books were on schedule. Some of them, I will be kind of forgiving with it because these guys, this is their first time doing something like this, especially something so massive. I feel horrible for both of these guys, for both Ethan and Richard, for the amount of books they have to ship and how much. Because you think about Iron Sights was I'm gonna say, what was that? I feel like there was 4 times the amount of people, or at least 4 times the amount of money that went into, or 4 times the money went into Jawbreakers, and Ethan's got 600,000, I think 700,000 total or something like that.
Yeah, it's 750,000. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, and he's going to be sitting. I feel so bad for him because he's going to be sitting there, or someone's going to be sitting there shipping all these. So let's see. Scott says Jawbreakers actually looks like a really fun or an amazing concept. It's like the Defenders and Spider-Man were a merc unit. Although I did not fund the book, I'm still enjoying the journey. So that's the other thing I really like about these crowdfunded books is I especially with Donald DeLay, you kind of see them grow over time. This goes back to what I was talking to Carl about with being ashamed of your artwork. But to me, that's one of the things I love about this that's unique to crowdfund comics and webcomics. You grow with the artist, especially when they're so easy to reach out and get responses from, like Donald, like Carl. That's part of the fun. I love it.
Yeah, I feel real bummed because I just didn't have the pocket money to put into Brutus because I really love that concept. I'm not the hugest fan of the hyper-violent space stuff, but his imagery just looks so much fun, and I love the psychobilly take on it. That's just I love rockabilly music, so that whole take on that it just sounds like music every time I look at his pages. So I was really bummed I couldn't put that together for it. So I hope they do there's been talk about whether or not they're doing a second printing or try to go through Diamond with it. I hope they do because I definitely want to buy that at some point.
I love that.
I would love to buy Brutus the Badass as well. That looks really good.
Yeah, I put the last of my, well, not the last, but at the moment, I had to choose between Brutus and And oh, come on, Bigfoot Bill. And my wife and I are just both big Tin April fans, so it just sadly it wasn't a hard decision.
That's when I have to get around to funding. Yeah, here to talk about Red Rooster and Graveyard Shift, both of which did really well, if I'm not mistaken, like shattered their expectations.
Yeah.
For me, one of the ones I'm looking forward to the most is Sovereign. Like Andrew Huerta's art is really, really something.
Yeah, it's not my thing, but I can really see why people like it.
Yeah.
I want more stuff like that in comics, and that's when I fund. A lot of times when I put down more money to fund these projects, I think about this is what I want to see more of.
Yeah, Andrew Huerta's stuff is very clean and stylish, even if it is meant to look jagged and rocky.
Yeah, you know, I don't feel like it's so hard to read, but at the same time, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of Kelly Jones stuff. And I don't know if you guys are big into Kelly Jones, but he did a lot of covers for Batman, and did
He's
small.
still around. He still does some cool stuff, Kelly Jones.
Yeah, I mean some of his stuff's really cool. I didn't really like his Batman, but I do know like he did a Deadman miniseries with Mike Barron that is on my short list of buying.
He did the Swamp Thing story with Len Wein. I think actually the last big published Swamp Thing novel of Len Wein's life, you know, rest his soul.
Matt has returned. Can we hear you? I don't think so.
I feel like the odd one out on the stream. I'm the only one who isn't named Matt.
Yeah.
That's how this all started. And then
on my last stream, when I was my last show when I was here with Matt Wenger, he asked me, so what's this? Is this a show for only people named Matt? And I said,
Carl's here.
It's hosted by the Matts and directed by the Matts, but we're not exclusive. In fact, last week we had Poke Fire on, and he said, well, did you make her a Matt? And I said, no, she's Poke Fire. We want her to stay who she is. Very disappointed that I had not, in fact, enforced that she be a Matt, because it could be a girl's name.
Yeah, it's 2019, dude. It could be whatever you want it to be.
You know, we did come up with a central religion for our Mattriarchy.
Oh, how do we? I don't know that I've heard about that.
It's Kirby.
Oh yeah, he set it up on my stream. He's just like
Kirby, just as he is round, is the center of the universe. Everything revolves around him.
Round.
His round shape represents how everything in the world revolves around him. And his feet vaguely look like hearts, which means we should give our hearts to him.
Well, that's ridiculous. I thought
we were having a ball last time talking about Kirby.
Oh my goodness! It sounds like you guys stay up all night eating Cheetos and playing Nintendo while downing Mountain Dew. That's what it sounds like.
I'd love that. Like, see, if I actually met Carl, that's what I feel like that's how it would actually go.
I think it might. I think it might.
But yeah, it was really the stream version of my parents are out and I'm throwing a party.
that is exactly how he described it to me.
And then I had to get Carl to help me with the stream as I turned it into from the Mattriarchy House Party edition into the Mattriarchy Crashing on Carl's Couch edition.
Yeah.
Still a house party, but I had to be the one to host it.
You clean up and put all the bottles in the fridge and all that stuff. That's just shameful.
That's either John talking about more indie books, some Bigfoot or saving up for Bigfoot Bill. Nachos, that's what Nacho says. Talk about different things. Yeah, I do like kind of the diversity of different projects inside of our circle. Like, you know, you've got Cyberfrog, and then you have things like Jawbreakers, and then you have Brutus, which, you know, is a very Lobo type book. And Mike's not cooperating. Very sorry to hear that, Matt, and hopefully we can work out another time yeah, to have
Absolutely. We're going to have you back for some time because I tell you, I've had this conversation in my head to have with Matt Trinh for a month now, where I really I want to pick his brain about that sliver intersection between science fiction and fantasy because he writes both. He's got this huge space opera science, but it's not just space opera. It seems very heavy in the science fiction elements of that. Strategy and all that kind of stuff in the McKinnon Chronicles, and then he's doing this story, the Mythics, which has got this urban street magician stuff going on, and I'm really interested to hear his takes on both those genres, because there's a lot of crossover between those genres, and it's very different and different attitudes go into writing them, and so I'm really interested to hear his take on it. He always has something thoughtful to say about it when pinned down. But he's like the wind. I can't get him to stick around here.
My girlfriend says I'm saving up for Matt McGibson's books, and I hope I can get a discount. I'm gonna tell her this is kind of just a general thing right now. And when I eventually get around to getting stuff out, for you guys to see, and I am working on it. It's just
hey, it's working now.
Oh, there he is.
Oh,
Are you with us?
Yeah. As soon as I gave up, it begins to work.
Wait. Yeah, like my stuff was gonna start free. If I do I wouldn't start an Indiegogo project unless I had gotten my name out there quite a bit. You do have to kind of build up a name for yourself with these things.
That is a very, very true thing. I don't think there's one right way to do it. And of course, we are going to be in the next month. We're going to be trying our hand at some of this crowdfunding stuff too, and see if that works. But Matt, thanks for coming on for sure. It's been a hell and high water trying to get you on your side, I think.
Yeah, I'm a very elusive person.
Well, we sure are glad that you could make it today.
Thank you.
Now, I will tell you, we normally wrap about 9 o'clock local time. By local, I mean mine.
Mountain people.
But yeah, because I'm an egotist, and so I count everything from my own perspective. But because we finally got you here, we're going to go ahead and go a little long today. So those of you guys that are sitting on to watch, hopefully you can stick around for that. So as I said, just before your mic started working again, I have for about a month wanted to sit down and pick your brain about your perspective on the two genres, science fiction and fantasy, and what you see as the line that ties them together. So why don't you spend some time just talking about your two projects, the McKinnon Chronicles and the Mythics, and kind of where you're coming at with those.
Well, at this point, it seems like Mythics is going to come out before McKinnon Chronicles because there seems to be some kind of bad luck surrounding that project, I guess. But basically, Mythics is about basically it's set in a world very much like ours. It's it's part of a shared universe with Dan Sekarov's Adobe Kroger and Brett McGowan's Changelink, and rather than having it be about a magical creature from folklore or a holy knight, this one surrounds one of the lesser told stories of a supernatural investigator, part of a order that's supposed to keep balance between the mortal world and the worlds of the supernatural. So he has a day job. And basically facing down creatures of folklore doesn't pay the bills for once. So I've got the idea for it is that the first volume would be something of a long prologue where I establish the world and the character Althea Fletcher and her spirit companion Gallatin set up their kind of a father-daughter relationship and all that, set up the different organizations in the world, how things work, and the whole idea with Althea is something I've had with decided to do female leads, make them human. Another example would be Maisie from McKinnon Chronicles. She's a young woman in command, but she doesn't know everything. She has her own flaws, her own weaknesses, and she actually has a family that she has to come. She comes home to once every tour of duty. So there's and that whole blend. It's actually interesting how you talk about the line between fantasy and science fiction. Is that I actually do have an element of fantasy in McKinnon Chronicles where I have this group called Tech Mages, where they use advanced technology to simulate magic. Something that I'm not going to delve into just yet because it'll be just too much for people to understand, or it'll just be too much. Information overload kind of thing.
Oh yeah, you gotta when you're dealing with those, and I get the feeling from hearing you talk about the McKinnon Chronicles that there's a lot of sweet in these stories, that there's a lot of elements, and there's a prolonged aspect to it. And when you're dealing with something like that, you have to give it to people in manageable chunks. You know, that's one thing. A problem I've always had when trying to talk about our stories is I have centuries of time in my head, right? All of these multiple characters going through multiple, going through their different lives and passing on their knowledge to the next generations. And it's a tough thing when he says, "Oh, so what's your comic about?" To try to boil that down into a couple of sentences that are intriguing, rather than try to explain, well, so when my character Chad was 7, this happened, and that when he's 20. You know, those are things that it's really hard to get around. So I understand the idea. You're just like, okay, magic's a thing, but we're not talking about that right now. Just remember that.
Yeah, pretty much.
I actually understand that pretty well. Well, my webcomic has a fairly simple story. It takes place in a universe that's I've had in my head for a while, and it's just if I went over all the details of what that universe was like, you'd all think I was crazy or something.
Oh yeah.
That we're like high functioning psychopaths when it comes to, or sociopaths when it comes to writing, because we think about things to like almost an unhealthy amount, like all the little details of everything, and it's almost unhealthy.
Right, and that's like we were talking about earlier. You know, the challenge of the writer is that you're constantly in your head and all of your characters' heads, and so you're never really in your life. You're always, you know, my wife says, I just want you to be present with me, and I said, I want to be present with you, but there's also all of these other things happening in the back of my head all the time. So my mind is never on where I am and what I'm doing, because I'm always thinking about, you know, what happened in 1972 in Fremont, Colorado, you know, which doesn't really exist. So
yeah. It's
so with Mythics.
Yep.
The characters you're working at are like basically paranormal investigators. Do they have? Is it like an agency, or is it like a hereditary order, or what's your framework for that?
Well, basically the whole structure of what's known as the Order of Mythics is similar to the British Cunning Folk, where it wasn't based on hereditary. It's more based on their own abilities. So, since this order was started in the spirit realm, they'd keep an eye on what children and what babies were born who would have the most potential. And whenever a baby was found that had potential, they'd have the future spirit companion just following them and protecting them until they're old enough to be trained.
So it's a little bit like the Order of the Jedi, but trans-dimensional aspect to it.
Pretty much, and you can also have sex and have kids. And
Oh,
have
wow.
family. So, yeah.
Sounds to me like they got it a lot better than the Jedi.
Yeah, let's not get into that this stream. We talked about Catholic and Protestant theology. We've talked about, you know, Kira Kurosawa and manga. Let's leave Star Wars out of this. So, with that, so with the situation that's there, is the older gentleman that you were talking about are they in that mentor role, the spirit guides sort of thing, or is he just another fellow?
What?
You had mentioned Matt had talked about I can't remember his name.
Skeleton?
I think so.
Okay. Well, he's more of someone that holds on to her magical who holds on to the keys to her magical powers. Since I now share a universe with Dan Sacro's Adobe Kroger. That story has an order of holy knights who will just subjugate anyone with magical ability in a heartbeat. So anyone who isn't picked up by them gets taken away to that holy order. So to protect their agents, they just basically keep the magical powers on lockdown just in case something happens, and only used for basically for if it's really bad. Because there's a ton of ways that you could deal with a folklore creature without using magic.
Okay, so it's a little more like a not exactly, but kind of like Doctor Who's companions then.
Something like that. And
in terms of the dynamic between them, I mean.
Oh yeah, but it's with the order in general. They can be basically anything. They could be anywhere between parental figures to future lovers, and so on. But the lovers part is not Elfia and Gallatin. Gallatin sees her more as a daughter than anything else.
Yeah. So the skeleton, that was the last name I was thinking of. I love that because personal story. My mother was a huge Red Skelton fan, right?
Yep.
But when I was very young, we didn't have access to the movies or TV shows or anything. And then when I was in junior high, Mom brought home a box set of VHS cassettes because that's how old I am, and introduced me to his comedy routines and his clowning and stuff. And at first, I thought his name was Skeleton, and I would always call it Red Skeleton, and nobody corrected me for like 2 or 3 years. And then I was looking again, and I was like, "There's missing an E on this package. I've been saying this wrong for 3 years. Why did nobody correct?"
That was me when I was younger too, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, but it was funny to me. But I think I like the name for many reasons, but that's one of them because I have a silly story.
Yeah, it's interesting how names can can trick you.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about telling stories too. Is also like is getting to pick the best fit for all of that. One of the things that I have to laugh at. I'm not going to presume that you've read my webcomic, Force of Good and Evil, but in it, I've got two main characters. One is named Chad and one is named Greg. And when we came up with the characters, we named them after a couple of people that the co-creator and I, Chris Lawton, we knew. We worked with these guys, Chad and Greg. And Chad was this boisterous, gregarious fellow who was just a little bit aggressive, but in a fun way. And Greg was this mousy and reserved and quiet guy. And so we used their names because those were general traits we wanted our characters to have. And it was only many years later that I am acquainted with the stereotypes of Chad being kind of the ball capper guy, which still fits our Chad, and the whole concept of good guy Greg, which our Greg is a patently good guy. So I always thought that was funny, just that in hearing people throw those names around, they actually fit with our characters, but that wasn't at all what I was going for with it.
Happy accidents, they happen.
Happy accidents. Very much so.
Which is actually funny about happy accidents, because the shared universe actually wasn't intended.
Yeah, I've been wanting to ask about that. How did you guys line those up?
It just happened. Brett was the first one to. He had a script for Changeling, and he wanted my opinion on it. So I gave it to him, and then we started talking about our influences, and we basically decided. I realized that our stories line up in a way. And then Dan, he had just released a audiobook for Adobe Kroger. So
Oh wow. Okay.
yep. So he let us listen to it for our input, and it just all came into place.
That's one thing I think is really interesting too, in the way you describe that, is not something that I picked up on before, but the antagonism between the direction of Dan's story and your story. I think that's a really interesting interplay.
Oh yeah, not delving into too much detail, but it's gonna be a bit more personal between Adobe and Althea.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'm not going to get into any of that just yet. It's a little early on.
Spoil it. I think just the fact that they have those different motivations, or not motivation necessarily, but different directives. It's built in that you gotta have a meeting of the minds, so to speak, clashing of the intention. I think that's great.
Oh yeah, and the interesting thing is that Brett has Brian Ball's permission to use Regina in Changeling, so she's going to be making an appearance in there as well,
which is pretty cool. Bags is a remarkable book. It's a remarkable book.
Yeah, and I've gained permission to have a version of Regina in McKinnon Chronicles, so I'm going to. It's probably going to be a running joke because of how big this universe is. Every time you see Regina in a kind of cameo, that's not going to be the same Regina.
Mm-hmm.
Because in all likelihood, it's a family of probably thousands by then. And likely, there's possibility that there's 100 different Reginas out there in that universe. So it's going to be one of those running gags that I think people are going to find funny. It's really kind of funny though.
Yeah, well, I think so. I think it's going to have its own. It's going to kind of have its own wheels in some ways. Now, totally off the subject of your projects a little bit. Have you? And speaking of rags, have you got a chance to read Punchline?
Yes, I have.
Is that amazing or what? I have had so much fun with that book.
I've actually decided to base the structure of Mythics, but on Punchline with the 15 pages per issue, just to keep it at a manageable level of cost. But funny thing is that I started reading Punchline before they announced any kind of collaboration between them and Rags. And the writer of Punchline is following me on Twitter, so
yeah, I first ran into to that with the Antarctic versions. I had a so I live in Western Nebraska, and we have a game store in town that sells monthly comics now. They only really carry the big two. They work with a distribution service that sub-distributes Diamond stuff, right? So they don't have the access to the full stuff because they don't have a full Diamond membership for various reasons. So with that, I couldn't get Antarctic stuff in my local store. And there's a store I'm about 2 hours from Cheyenne, Wyoming. And there's a store down there that's willing to work with me. And I only get down there every 6 weeks or whatever, but they're willing to hold stuff for me if I can't make it or whatever. So they're pretty cool. I was down there picking up Rags, and I saw Punchline on the shelf, and I'm like, what the hell? I'm going to pick that up. And within that first Antarctic version, I was just hooked into the universe. I gotta know. That's great. I just love it so much.
yeah. I think it's. But I will say that it's awesome that these great books are getting such attention.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that's wonderful about it too is you have so many people that grouse and moan constantly that the market doesn't want new stuff; they just want old stuff. And anytime you try to change one of these characters to bring in a new market, that everybody gets all mad about it. And I'm like, I want Batman to be Batman, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to read Silencer. It doesn't mean I'm not going to read Rags or Punchline. Bring on new characters. That's great, but don't massacre the old ones. That's
Yeah, I can't believe that Marvel hasn't learned from the fact that they have all these interesting characters that could follow their diversity line, but they don't follow through on them. Instead of having a solo title for a character like Wiccan, they decide to make Iceman gay.
yes.
Yeah, I did not like that change at all.
I'm sorry, what was that, Matt?
No, I was just saying, yeah, the Iceman change, but I did not like that at all. That was just such blatant disrespect to a legacy character.
It was the height of cheap writing. You don't get cheaper than that. And I will stand by that statement.
It's literally 1 second Bobby's fine, the next second it's just, you're gay, Bobby. You're gay now.
It's like one of the things that Zach said about it, right? When it first came out, he said, we have 50 years, or at least 40 years, of looking into this character's mind. Because we are in the place where we can read people's thoughts because they're put on the screen for us, or they're put on the page for us. There's no reason to think that he was gay ever in all of and he's on a team with psychics. He was trained by psychics. There is zero reason in a world full of telepathy why this is a thing. And now this is a thing.
And then not only that, but they make him the most stereotypically offensive gay stereotype. Like, I could go find some really homophobic guy out of a trailer, and he would probably come up with more gracious things to say.
Yes.
How gay people grace.
Even us horribly homophobic conservative Christians have more respect for gays than that.
That's the funny thing is I've always been told my whole life, and first of all, I just absolutely love being told who I hate. But
I know, right?
But to me, I've never really thought about it as I hated them. I was just like, well, when I was younger, like you're literally like, ew, gay people, just like you did with girls. Like, it's one of those things, like you think about in a very juvenile way, of course, when you're a kid. So, you get older, you just realize like, oh, they're people. And you get told all the time you hate them. And I'm like, I don't hate these people. Until you're home. I was like, that's like the dumbest phobia to have. Like, if I'm going to be scared of something, I want it to be something like spiders. See gay people. He's going to come in. He's going to like tell me that my clothes are not looking so great.
Well, and one of the things too is it's one thing to have a disagreement with somebody about what propriety means. And that's, I think, part of what it comes down to is it is a disagreement on what propriety means. But that doesn't necessarily mean you hate somebody, right? I mean, as a long-haired fellow, I've heard it, right? My whole life, my whole adult life, pretty much, I've been long-haired. And people will have their opinions about whether I should have my hair long, or when I cut it, there's a whole class of people that come up to me and tell me that cutting my hair was a mistake and I should have kept it long. And, people always have opinions about you. That doesn't necessarily mean they hate you for it, And that's, I think, just such a silly assumption, such a silly jump to assume that just because there's a disagreement, that you can't have a respectful, rational disagreement with people.
Well, I also think it's it's still fairly early on into gay rights and everything. So and to assume that all these people are like irredeemable and stuff like that when there's such a drastic change, we're going from what is it, hundreds and hundreds of years, if not thousands, of being really, really against gay marriage or homosexuality entirely. And there are some people that are gonna be like a little uncomfortable with such this big jump, even if you could argue it is very necessary. Like I'm not gonna get into the whole thing of it right now, but there's a lot going on with that, and a lot more than people really should take into account.
Yeah, and like I said, there's lots to discuss, and I don't want to take up too much time on there. But yeah, it is something that, like we've talked about before on the show, that if people just lived with a little grace toward each other, we could really get a lot out of it.
I think it's just we got to bring it back.
Yep, gotta bring it back. And I think that's one of those things that that's if there's a theme to the matriarchy so far, it's the importance of grace toward each other as humans and in other ways too. So Matt Trinh, one of the things I want to bring up something that I think is I was hearing talk. I can't remember when it was. Probably about a month ago. We were talking about the Kennedy Chronicles, and I think one of the most interesting dynamics in that you were wanting to work toward was that Maeve
Maisie.
Anyway, is that she has a family on Earth, and that so she has a job to do out in space, but she's going to have to deal with the consequence of being away from her family, and they're going to grow up without her. And you've got the whole time dilation through space travel aspect. Was there a particular element that, first of all, I think that concept is so important. I think that's really a really interesting concept. But what brought you to that point? Was there a particular thing that kind of keyed that into you, or what was your motivation?
I thought it was a cool idea. But I have to say, I've also got that idea from after watching Interstellar and watch how that tore a family apart. But so if it tears a first generation family, they had to deal with that apart, how would it affect a family in the far future where lives last far longer than they do now?
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, and children are going to be. It's going to be interesting to see how the children will react to their mother being gone for so long. So it'd be very similar to during the Napoleonic Wars, where you had sailors going off to war for months and months, even years or so. away from their families, away from their children. And a lot of it seems like it's rounding back again. Time dilation gives the same kind of slowdown of messaging as it did back then, but the biggest difference is that you got to see, you saw the child when they were 3 or 4 years younger. So imagine if that was your kid. You see a video of them when they were 4 years younger, and at the very moment you're watching that video, they're 4 years older than that. Hopefully that makes this sense.
No, absolutely. And I think one of the things, speaking as like, I can somewhat as a parent. I mean, I'm not a mother, but I can only imagine, even as a dad, like that would be a tough thing to be away from your child as they're growing up, and for so little of your life has passed compared to how much of their life, because that's how it would work. And then to know that you're losing exponential time being away from them, but knowing that at the same time, that concept of duty, say, well, I'm good at this job needs done, somebody has to do it, this is my responsibility, be in this position, but I know I'm losing exponential time with my family. That would be a really difficult thing to go through. As a father, I can imagine it would be even more so as a mother, not being able to be mom, in those situations.
Oh yeah, there is going to be a difference with that. But there's one thing that I found. There's something that I read the other day that had a fundamental misunderstanding of time dilation, and that came from Eric Larson's Savage Dragon, where he, for some reason, decides that if you go at the speed of light, that causes time to slow down in space. But in reality, time dilation is caused by the fact that you're not going the speed of light. If you're going the speed of light, it's going to take you. Let's just break it down simply. Alpha Centauri is 4.2 light years away. If you're going at speed of light, it'll take you 4.2 years to reach Alpha Centauri. If you're going below that, they'll take a lot longer, but the time that takes you will seem a lot shorter on a ship. So let's say it feels like it takes about 500 years on Earth. They'll probably take you about maybe a quarter of that while you're on the ship.
And so that affects like less than light speed, right? So it's the matter about how quick you're going in relation to light then?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to think about what happens when you go faster than light.
Yeah, that becomes a whole different thing.
Hey guys, I mean, I do find everything you guys have to say very interesting. And Matt Trinh, I really want to get around to reading your stuff. But it's getting increasingly late over.
Oh yeah,
it's getting increasingly late over here, like over in the land of the rising sun, east. But I don't, and wherever Carl's from, he's from Carl's Jr. probably.
I'm from Florida, man.
Why is everybody from Florida?
I'm not from Florida.
Well, I live in Florida anyway. I was born in Illinois, but I was born in Illinois, but I live in Florida.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm getting a wee bit tired. Normally we end off this, like, I think last time I was feeling it too. Like I was passing out. It was last week with me and Carl. But
we were like halfway passed out.
we were like, I was hanging on. Like I actually had this I have this traditional Irish cane in my room as a gift for my grandmother. And I was like leaning on that the whole time, like propping myself up, kind of having something to remind me, hey, I'm still going. I got to keep going.
Well, you should just quit before you get that tired. That makes no sense.
Well, like I got all the way to the, or like I got to the end. We were, I think, what was it? Was it like 12 or 1 in the morning, Carl?
It was like 12.
It was a blast though. Like I don't know. But see, normally our episodes are like 2 hours long.
Yeah, usually cap it at 2 hours. Trying to go.
I think it's because you have real world obligations, right?
Yeah, yeah. I will. And today, I did not have to take off at 9 normally, but typically at 9 I got to be gone by. But today was a little different day, so I don't want to get into that too much because that's a whole story. We can go from there. But I do think I think Matt's right. Wrap it up. For those of you folks in the chat, thanks for sticking around. I'll have to go back and read your comments later on because I didn't today because I don't know. I just haven't yet.
I tend to be the comment guy, I guess.
Yeah, I like it. I like it when Matt does the comment thing. It frees me up to not. Matt Trinh, thanks for coming on talking to the projects.
You're welcome.
To reading Mythics when you guys get that ready to go. That sounds real cool.
All right, you guys want me to read off some of the last comments we're getting here?
By all means.
All right, so here we have Nacho was talking to him in the chat about chain blocking, and he was said the most hate he's ever gotten on Twitter was actually ordering fans, and that kind of surprises me because that doesn't really seem like people, like, you know, the types of people that watch quartering stuff would be the ones to pick fights or to get aired with someone like Nacho. Like, I don't really think Nacho's, I don't know Nacho's like political leanings, but I know that he hangs out with us and we get along just fine with him. So that is a little surprising to me. Danielle says, I have to get going, but it's really nice to be here with you guys. They say, have a good day. Or what's his name? Nachos brings up that it's 4:34 over in Britain. So
Nacho is a madman. That's 100% of the truth. That guy is.
I really appreciate though, like that someone's up that late listening to us.
It's insane.
No, I mean, I really, really appreciate that, and thank you so much, Nacho.
Well, I appreciate it, but it's the mark of a crazy person. You need help, my friend.
I did hear somewhere that like it's not good for you to be up or sleep during the day and up at night.
Yeah, for it's the circadian rhythm thing. You end up looking like this. I don't sleep well either.
You end up looking like me as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take the little red cartoon nose and the eyes like that. I mean, but yeah, why don't we get? I think it's time that we head out. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And thank you, Matt. I know that there were a lot of complications, but it was really great to have you on. You're on my list of people that I need to get around to reading your webcomic.
Thanks. It's Mythics. I think God willing, I'll have the first page done by January 15th. Beth Burney is doing the artwork. She's a very professional artist who I'm very happy to be working with.
Well, I look forward to seeing it for myself.
Thank you. I've got some sample pages going around Twitter, so I'm sure eventually you'll see them. I'll probably put up a tweet later on.
I'll definitely start following you because I thought I was already, but apparently, just checking Twitter now, apparently I'm not.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, Nacho's wishing us a good night.
I swore somebody I was following and it was not. Just friends of friends kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's what it is because I see a lot of stuff from him from Brett McGowan. Like I thought I was already following him.
I think I'm following Brett McGowan. I'm pretty sure.
Brett's a great guy. I'd love to have him on here someday.
Yeah, we definitely need to have him on sometime. I think we may have to pre-tape though, because he's
He works.
guy to track down during the weeks.
Yeah, he's usually working about this time, so
He sometimes he'll sometimes jump into somebody else's stream during lunch break, but I don't think we line up
before. Yeah.
Actually, I think you do.
Well, they'll have to pester him more then.
Oh
Maybe
yeah,
we'll
definitely.
get him on our lunch the next week.
And I figure that when we set up the Mythoverse website, when it gets launched, we'll go have you guys as one of our streams that we go to.
Sounds
I'd love to be the host and promote you guys. See, I'm really looking forward to everything that you guys have coming out, especially like I hate to play favorites, especially right in front of somebody on the team, but Changeling is something I'm really looking forward to.
Everyone is, and besides, I helped him with the first script. So
well, it's the Banshee girl. That's why everyone loves Maeve.
Yeah,
everyone likes her because she's cute.
that's true.
Like I always feel bad saying that about characters that are 14 years old, but she is really cute.
Well, there's here's something I'm going to let you in a little secret. Being an old dude, there's cute and there's cute, right? Like little girls, no cuteness. It's not the same way. It's not. It's sort of like a puppy is cute, but it's a human version of that. There's just
exactly
about that. That's not perverse or at all. It's just something in the nature that is adorable. And,
we've been talking about doing a chibi comic with all the main characters from the Mythoverse.
That's amazing.
And we joked about having Maeve as the baby.
That's amazing. I want Nerd Wonder to draw it.
Speaking of which, I'm still getting to Nerd Wonder's profile on Twitter.
Well, Nerd Wonder's getting really busy now, so who knows?
I know she's crazy.
I'm so proud of her, honestly. Like, I don't even know her that closely, but I really admire just how much work she's putting in.
Yeah, and she's relentlessly optimistic. That's the thing I find most endearing about her stuff on Twitter. She's relentless.
Yeah, everyone else will get in fights and call each other names, and I think I've seen her like genuinely angry once. That's about it.
Yeah, she's a good egg.
Yeah, very good egg.
Meanwhile, what am I? I'm scrambled egg.
Okay, guys, we really got to sign off for the reels.
Yeah, we keep on talking about going, and it just
and then we go to eggs.
You get next to people you really click with, it's hard to say goodbye.
Well, if you want, I can come back.
Oh, if you want to, sure. In the future, we're here every Thursday, 9 o'clock normal people time and 7 o'clock mountain people time.
There you go.
All right, well, thank you for having me on.
All right, everybody. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much. Anyone still watching, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you guys next week with Mattriarchy Returns.
All right. Bye.
Bye.